I love it. I have my hype girl right in front. If we're going to get started in like about a minute or two, so if you can find seats, that would be amazing because we have a great day in store for you. Thank you. Thank you so much for making it in today. We really appreciate it. My name is Comel Caruso. I am the co-founder and chief growth officer of HerMD. I want to welcome everyone to the Future of Women's Healthcare is here. And from the looks of this room, let me tell you, it is here. It is here in this room today. I am so honored and humbled to be hosting this event today. with an amazing lineup of speakers, all of which are women who are absolutely incredible. They're really revolutionizing the women's healthcare space. And so we have an amazing morning lined up for you. If you had told me a year ago, maybe even 6 months ago, that we would all be here today, together in this room talking about eradicating the shame and the stigma and the taboo around women's healthcare, around menopause, and about sexual health, and talking about progress, innovation, having Oprah have just done a special talking about menopause. I don't know if I believe you, but I'm so excited that we are saying no to the status quo. And I'm not sure I would have believed this 6 months ago or a year ago. I want to thank all of our sponsors here today. I want to thank all of our speakers, not only supporting HerMD, but for also being change makers in this space. I'm also so honored to introduce Dr. Somi Javaid, our founder, our chief medical officer, and I'm so very lucky to also call her my sister. She is a visionary. This is always hard for me because she's my sister and I love her so dearly, but she's a visionary, a pioneer in women's sexual health and menopause. She inspires me every day. She inspires the team at HerMD every day. This is going to be hard for me to get through. To live and breathe our mission, to educate, advocate for, and empower women, to demand the care they truly deserve. Welcome, Dr. Javaid.
Wow, I'm usually the one making people cry. Love you, sis. Too short, too old, too brown, too much of a deviation what we perceive to be a typical speaker or thought leader. As an OBGYN and a lead surgeon in the operating room, I have been asked directly, who's in charge? An assumption that was made that it couldn't be me. I'm a woman. After delivering babies all night, not having slept, barely eaten, and hair kept out of I got called into my boss's office, thinking I was being told I did a great job. He told me that my hair needed to be worn differently, as the ponytail was being interpreted as me being too young to be able to deliver patients. I have had patients refuse to see me because of my ethnic background, and I've had my own peers downplaying my experience because of my gender. I've sat with women, my patients, and I've held their hands as they've cried, as I'm their 10th medical doctor they've seen, and the first one to acknowledge their pain and present a solution. I'm the first person who has made them feel seen, because I too understand what it feels to be invisible. Even now, as I expand HerMD, it is clear the status quo has not changed outside the operating room. State regulators will often come into HerMD asking for the person in charge, looking over my head. Yes, I'm only 5'2" and I don't wear heels when I'm operating. And they'll lock eyes with the male surgeon in the room, diverting their attention back to me. I pull a Taylor Swift. Hi, yes, it's me. I'm the problem, it's me. But I'm actually his boss. The fight to close the gender gap in medicine and the workplace is ongoing and essential. These words, these experiences, they are powerful. And I have had so many words thrown at me. Woman, minority, founder, doctor, mother, disruptor, human beings. Words can shape the reality in which we live. They can insult us. They can tear us down. They can force us to question who we are. But they can also be used to heal, inspire, and to motivate us. Words can serve as a springboard for our dreams to become our reality. And my reality is a more equitable one in which patients are no longer invisible. And patients finally have access to the care that they deserve. It was my father who said to me after I was dealing with the frustration of working in our healthcare system, Somi, if you can't find a door that opens for you, build your own damn door. These words became the footprint of my dreams and the HerMD model of care. I had spent years being asked to see 50 patients a day with compassion, medical precision, and don't forget about capturing that revenue for the hospital system. Each patient's appointment time was slotted for 15 minutes. not nearly enough time to listen to them and offer a comprehensive healthcare solution and offer them the healthcare they deserve. I kept going back to administration. I asked for more time. Another word, no. Better rooms, no. More modest gowns, no. In-office surgery, it saves them money. It saves the system money. No. Education for menopause and sexual health, no. It's not a priority. I was repeatedly told no, and my requests were dismissed, and they were not deemed essential. This was the state of our medical system. It's a broken system in which providers are expected to operate within. And guess who's suffering because of it? Our patients. They suffer these inequities, rendering them without access to real solutions, repeated dismissals, delays in diagnosis, and information that they need, that is essential to help them feel empowered so that they can make decisions for their own healthcare needs, for their own bodies. That day in 2015, my father's words actually shook me to my core. They were the impetus that spurred me to incorporate new words into my personal mission as I sought out to revolutionize the women's healthcare system with the HerMD model of care. Fearlessness, bravery, disruptor. And I continued to be met with resistance. It will never work. Just be happy. You can't change the system. My mother, who's sitting right here, will tell you the worst thing to say to Somi is no, because that'll make our fight even harder. But these words were just words. They weren't going to stop me anymore. They inspired me to work even harder. You see, watch what happens when you tell a woman no, you can't do it. Watch what happens when she surrounds herself with amazing other women who are mission-driven, connected, and don't describe themselves as a company, but as a family. At HerMD, we are fixing this broken healthcare system once and for all. The truth is, it's not impossible. It's just really, really hard work. We've developed a model of care that allows patients enough time to express their healthcare concerns. Our providers are mission-driven. We provide them with work-life balance, and that opens the door to life-changing encounters with patients, ones that facilitate meaningful conversations, and finally are sparking lasting change. When you give patients and providers this time together, it is a beautiful and an empowering space, one that is free of stigma, taboo, and shame. And that's when the magic happens. And at home, we call that the HerMD magic. Let us continue to have these open and honest conversations moving forward so that we continue to dismantle and break down the barriers that prevent patients from receiving the health care they deserve. At HerMD, we're not stopping. We won't stop until every patient has access to the health care they deserve. There are no longer any words in the English or frankly any other language that are going to stop us. Here's to smashing the status quo, because it never changed anything, and creating a new standard of healthcare for women. Thank you for being here today. It's conversations like this that are going to spark that change we need.
Thank you. What a way to kick off this morning. I wanted to introduce our first roundtable. We'll be talking about sexual health and menopause care. And I am proud to introduce our esteemed panel of experts. We have Joe Mathisen, former Today Show producer, media executive, and documentary filmmaker. Dr. Somi Javaid, founder and chief medical officer of HerMD. Elisa Volkman, co-founder and CEO of The Swell, and Naomi Watts, chief creative officer and founder of The Stripes. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. And thank you guys for doing such amazing work in changing the world of menopause, because I'm 59, and when I started going through it, nobody was talking about it. And it was very scary, and it was very, very lonely. And I thought something was wrong with me. But it wasn't. it was menopause. So who knew? And I'm really honored to be here with you guys today, I think. I mean, I'd rather be 35, but then I would have to be dating again, and that's not so much fun. So I'm here. So I am in this menopause space because I went through it, didn't know what was going on. I met Tamsin Fidel, who sadly couldn't be here with us today. And we put our minds together. We both had TV backgrounds and said, we're not going to let the women who come after us go through what we did. And so we are putting together a film to hopefully entertain, educate, and enlighten all of us about this life stage, because 100 years ago we went through menopause and we died at 61. Now we have another 50 years ahead of us and we want to thrive. So that's why I'm in this space. Let me turn it over to you guys. Somi, you're the woman of the hour, and your story is the best, and it's very hopeful for all of us. Tell everyone why you got into this.
So the woman who started this all is actually sitting in the front row, so she's going to start crying. But I got that call that no one wants. I was pre-med at Northwestern at the time, and my father was on the other line, and Mom, I'm not going to look at you because otherwise I will start crying. He's like, Somi, you need to come home. And my mom had been in and out of hospitals the last 6 weeks, chest pain, left arm, shortness of breath. Like, y'all can Google that now. It's her heart, right? But no, the doctors were like, it's caffeine. Your kids are stressing you out. Maybe you need a vacation. And so I had literally left her the night before, and she's like, everything will be fine. Ends up getting rushed into emergent quadruple bypass surgery, robbing us of the time. We didn't get to hug her, tell her we love her. She was continually dismissed. And when people ask this question, they're like, oh, you guys weren't insured. No, we had insurance, and we were in Cleveland, Ohio, the mecca of cardiovascular care. But science and data at the time couldn't explain why a thin, non-smoking, 45-year-old woman would ever present with four-vessel disease. And she had a 95% widowmaker lesion. And so later when the surgeon came out, said she did amazing, explained that if the heart attack would have come, that she wouldn't be here with us today. And so I was pre-med at the time, and that was my aha moment that I needed to go into women's health care and be an advocate. I made a You're crying, Mom.
Did you expect anything less?
No. But I made a promise to her, and a promise to myself, that I was going to make change. And then I got my first big girl job, and I got smacked in my idealistic face. Seeing 50 patients a day, you don't have time to go to the bathroom or eat, let alone advocate for anyone or keep a promise. And so when the timing was right, took the other parent to go, no doors open, go build your own door. And so that was the birth of HerMD.
Which, by the way, is opening its 5th location in just a couple of weeks. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And some things happen for a reason, and Mom's still here, so that's the best. Naomi, you went into perimenopause pretty early, and that's kind of scary because we're not educated in it. We don't know what's going on in our bodies. How did you know, and why? And all these years later, not that it's that many years later, but years later, you started I Am Stripes. And what motivated you to do that, and how did you know you were even going through menopause at 36?
Well, I didn't, is the short answer. I knew nothing. I was clueless. And I was 36 and right at the precipice of wanting to start a family. And that's what motivated me to, that's why I found out. I wasn't getting pregnant after years of trying not to get pregnant. And I was like, what's happening? And a girlfriend of mine who was older than me said, why don't you go and get a blood panel? And I said, really? Why? What would you? And that's how clueless I was. So I went to my gynecologist, and he suggested that the results were showing that I was close to menopause. And that was probably the second time I'd heard that word uttered, maybe a couple more. But and I remembered in the back of my mind that my mother had told me she went into menopause early. She told me nothing else. She didn't tell me that she spent years suffering in the lead up to that point. She didn't tell me, about any symptoms or anything anecdotal. So I just didn't ask any questions, really. So I said, wait, so menopause? I'm going to go into early menopause? Does that mean I can have children? He went, well, you might want to think about a donor egg. And so I sort of panicked and went away, and I didn't even feel equipped to ask many questions because I really didn't know where to begin on that. The internet was not active like it is now. There weren't chat rooms and places, and there wasn't a community. I bounced things off friends, and it was met with very awkward, nervous laughs. And so I thought, oh wow, I'm on my own here. So it was a terrifying, lonely time. Long and the short of it, mercifully, I was able to fall pregnant naturally with lots of natural interventions. I wasn't a candidate for IVF. And I had 2 healthy, gorgeous children. But quickly after that, I went into hardcore symptoms of, night sweats and brain fog. I'd had those when I was the night sweats leading up to before having children. So my body was telling me, but my brain wasn't. Then what happened was, again, I went back to trying to find friends and, answers, had some hand holding from doctors. I really was met with closed doors also. And it just, made me think I'm on my own and I don't know where I'm going. I feel ashamed. My life is over. I literally need to go to the corner and with my knitting needles. And I'm like, but no, I'm not done. And if you put me there, I might use those knitting needles in another way.
And that would be okay. That would be fine.
All would be forgiven. The crazy lady. I mean, that's the thing. There's nothing out there in storytelling or media other than, the crazy lady that shouts and screams at everyone. And it's just not true. With some support and community and hand-holding and caretaking, we can thrive. We are actually at that point where we know ourselves better. We're wiser for our cumulative experiences. And so we should be celebrating this time. We're living longer. We're not dying at menopause or just after. We're all headed here. So to get ready and prepared and to send that message to the younger generations, have empathy for the older generations. It just, my aha moment sort of came to me as I got later into menopause. And really at 50, I was done with the charade. I was done with holding on to the secret.
Isn't 50 wonderful?
50 is
50
so
is wonderful.
Great. Because you just feel like I'm not lying anymore. I'm not going to, keep trying to pretend that I'm this young person. And frankly, when I was young, and I still feel young, but when I was, in yoga rooms, I wasn't wearing my crop top because I didn't have a six-pack. I still don't have a six-pack. I have actually a wrinkly stomach that is, stretched in several ways from babies late in life that came too close together. But I'm wearing my crop top because the story is
good
told.
For you. Good for you.
And I feel like, I'm proud of myself. I'm encouraged by this time in my life, and my experiences matter and mean something. And I wanted Stripes to be aspirational. I wanted to create a club for women who don't feel reflected anymore in media or storytelling. And, I wanted simple solutions, which are, scalp to vag, let's address the dryness and own it and not be squeamish about it. In fact, we have a beautiful product called Vag of Honor to moisturize your vagina and treat it like the rest of your body, and as well as multiple other things. And we also have created a community through the hotspot on our website. We have Adulted, which is like a magazine, which is a combination of community as well as education, and the Menno Guide. So it's a three-pronged business. We launched in October, and we're thriving, and we invite you to join our group and learn and you know, be together, because this time is a valuable time.
It's valuable, and we're lucky to be here, right? There's so many of us who haven't even made it to 50. So when you get to live through this, it's a wonderful time. And I do think that turning 50, for me at least, was licensed to go, I don't really give a rip about anything that doesn't matter anymore, right? It's just, I'm on the back nine, and now it's my turn. It's my turn to do the things that help and contribute to life and make me feel good. Elisa, you have made a business out of life. And so you started Nerve about dating and relationships. When you moved to having children, you started Babel, for parents to babble. Now you started The Swell. Like Naomi said, we need a community because we do feel so alone. What motivated you to start that? And by the way, I told her yesterday, we talked, and I said, I'm looking forward to hearing what she's starting for the next stage after menopause. What can you come up with then?
Yeah, I'm already thinking about it. But first, I want to say I'm excited for my stripes crop top. I hope to see. I'd like to see Stripes make that, and I'll wear it with you. Thank you. Yes, I have been. I like to say I've been creating businesses around my own life phases, and I joke really my own identity crises. And I think what we have found, The Swell is my fourth company, and really I live my life out loud. I'm always asking questions, and usually I think pretty honest about what I'm going through and like to sort of problem solve. So in our 20s, we sort of started this company called Nerve, which was really the post-college, pre-marriage identity crisis, like who am I, what do I want to be? And I think for our generation, we've been living more out loud. I think as we were sort of digital innovators and on the forefront of digital, we were starting to meet online, talk online, and start to think more about our sexuality. And so all these questions were happening that no one was talking about, and we wanted to create sort of a safe space for people to come together to talk and to read and to navigate that phase of life. And then I became a parent, and I had sort of this new identity crisis around parenting. And for me, really, the experience was much more isolating than I had expected. I felt that everything I had read didn't really prepare me for the experience, and I don't know anyone can really be prepared for parenting. You never know what's going to hit you and sort of your journey to parenting and then beyond. But I just remember feeling incredibly isolated, alone. I was going through something called thrush. I don't know if anyone ever went through that. It was the craziest thing I could not get rid of. And as I was researching different questions, and nothing really existed that reflected the way I was feeling, and I think sort of this modern era of parenting. Again, I think our generation has been living very differently, and not a lot was available as we were going through all these new questions. And so this light bulb went off of, yes, I want to, why is no one talking about miscarriages? Why is no one talking about all of these things that we're sort of quietly going through? And I think I like to kind of joke that we like to go into sort of the taboo subject matter, because I think oftentimes what's happening when these big inflection points of our lives is you are up against a lot of things that create a lot of shame, confusion, judgment, fear. And it's incredible that we sort of go to each other in small circles, but not a lot exists online, or that I was finding, that really reflected what I was sort of navigating, thinking about, talking about. So we've created it. And as I've gone, so now I'm going from sex to babies to menopause. So now that I've got teenagers.
It's funny how fast that happens, isn't it?
Yeah.
Boom.
So, and geriatrics will certainly be next. But yes, as I think midlife hits us for a number of different reasons. Menopause is certainly one of the triggers that occurs, but I think a lot of different things start happening. And I just remember sort of realizing I was stepping into midlife with a lot of biological changes that were happening, psychological changes that were happening. And again, this light bulb went off, that there was not a single resource or community that I was aware of outside of AARP, which is so depressing. I mean, if anyone's gotten their card, like you run. And the idea that we even retire at 50 is strange. and so outdated. But there was no single resource or community. Again, it reminded me so much of when we started Babel. It was like, I'm now going through all of these new questions, fears, confusion. I'm starting to see on the other side of my life. I'm starting to go through biological changes. And I'm starting to think much more meaningfully and purposefully about my life. But yet, I also have never felt better. Like, I was like, but I feel great. Like, so what's up with this midlife crisis? Like, it feels much more like a reckoning to me. But there was not a single resource or community that I was aware of that reflected how I was feeling, that really stepped into the pain points in a smart, discerning way, but also leaned into the growth opportunities. I think that we are poised to do such incredible things in this phase of our lives after army crawling our way through our 20s and 30s. And 40s, to arrive at this phase. And now, as we sort of say, when you hit midlife or menopause today, you still have 40, 50 more years to go. So we truly are in a new sweet spot of our lives. And I think, the future of how we're aging, of how we're working, of how we're communing, I think is really changing, and nothing really existed. So in the spirit of what I've done before, we started the Swell to sort of solve for that.
It's pretty good. It's nice to have a community when you're over 40. So let's get to menopause misconceptions. Because, Naomi, you didn't even have conceptions, let alone misconceptions. You were just like, oh, it's menopause. I believed that when you went through menopause, your hair had to be silver and you had to wear bloomers. In my case, the curtains don't match the rug, but there is silver, but I went through menopause. And Somi, I know you can tell a ton of stories. So we're going to start with Naomi and talk about and when you were told you were going through menopause, did you have any idea what that meant?
No, is the short answer. But when COVID hit, and I was deep into my menopause and already on HRT and everything, and I had been working with skincare because one of my driving symptoms, which I knew nothing about and doctors knew nothing about, was radically itchy, angry, dry, irritable skin. I've always had sensitive skin, but I was going to work on camera every day, makeup application, hot lights, and my skin was screaming. And all I could do was just keep adding makeup to hide it. And I would go to doctors and they'd give me a topical ointment and, it would calm down for a minute, but, it was a Band-Aid fix. I didn't know what was going on until I started in COVID literally researching menopause symptoms. And that's when I realized there's 34 and more, right?
And counting.
And exactly. And I was like, wait, most people know about night sweats or hot flashes or brain fog. And we've sort of had those when we go through pregnancy because our hormones plummet and you have a sweaty night and you have you definitely have baby brain, so you have a little version of that. But all these other things, the dryness and the skin and the frozen shoulder and the, itchy ears and the UTIs and, all of those things, I had no prep for. And again, I said, Mom, why didn't you tell me this? Why didn't you give me more information? And she said, well, these are the conversations I never had with my mother because she never had them with hers. And so the baton is passed generation to generation. And I was like, wow, that really just struck me with how this piece of the story of a woman's medical experience, their hormonal cycle has just been left off. And we can go back to sex ed and, when the story is given, you have a beginning, you're prepped for, all of the things, STDs, pregnancy, fertility, all of that, right?
I'm laughing because I'm the mother who marks up the incorrect, like my girls are going through this at school, and then I sign it Dr. Somi Javaid, so they just don't label me as crazy mom, but they're still teaching them crazy stuff that's inaccurate.
Yeah, in fact, I had a conversation with my kids when they heard me saying, menopause in every single meeting 12 times. And I said, do you know what it means, by the way? And one of them said, isn't it when old ladies die? And
Yes, goodbye.
I said, I'm in menopause. And he went, like that. I went, no, darling, it's much more nuanced than that. So, yeah, that's, I've forgotten your question. I went on a tangent.
Well, also,
It was your misconceptions.
I'm also just so happy when you were describing the first thing, you're like dry, itchy. I was like, please don't say vagina.
Oh, that will come,
I was
Elisa.
like-
that will come.
And then you're like skin. I was like, oh god.
That's
I can
my
handle
mission.
skin.
That saying that should be no different than
I
your
know.
ear or your nose or your eye,
Yeah.
body part, right?
Yeah.
The skin is,
Start,
all the
yeah.
way down.
Yeah, I mean, is there a symptom here that we haven't mentioned that somebody might have? Ringing ears? I don't know. But
Frozen
Joint
shoulder is a new one for me.
Palpitations, anxiety.
it goes on way beyond 34.
Yeah.
So when you see patients, Somi, what do you hear them saying to you? What are some of their biggest misconceptions?
That they think there's a beginning, middle, and end. That they think even if they don't go on hormones that it'll end. You know, and we know in studies that women who choose not to do any options can be symptomatic for over 20 years. And I think the other biggest misconception, we all read that article that came out, like we have really misled you in the medical community. 2002, there was a study that came out that tested the wrong population. So they included women 70 to 79. I promise you, us menopause experts aren't chasing down 79-year-old women who are happy, asymptomatic, and not having any menopausal symptoms. And so there was 2 studies of the arm. Estrogen only, because if you don't have a uterus anymore, you don't need progesterone. And then estrogen and progesterone. And what they were looking for are their cardiovascular benefits. And is there any association or increased risk of breast cancer? They did in the E plus P arm, so estrogen and progesterone did, and they didn't see a significant cardioprotective arm, but they didn't finish the study. So they stopped it. But in the estrogen-only arm, we saw a decreased risk of breast cancer, a decreased risk of dying from breast cancer if you got it, and an overall decreased risk of mortality. And we told women to throw away their hormones without getting all of the data. Just think about that for a second. It's crazy. And so we haven't moved on since then.
No.
We have done multiple studies now showing that hormone replacement therapy in the appropriate patient should be the gold standard, helps with bone, brain, and is cardioprotective. The caveat is you need to treat the right age demographic. So we talk about this menopause hormone window. Ideally, it is safest when you start within the first 10 years of menopause.
And that means not getting your period.
Yes. So menopause, defined in 2 different ways. 12 consecutive months without a period, or if you've had a partial hysterectomy or an ablation, we can also diagnose it with a blood test. We check for something called FSH, the menopause hormone, and if it's elevated, because it elevates, because it's like, ovaries, come on, make us some estrogen and testosterone. So those are the 2 different definitions, but I think. And the other big misconception are hormones are bad. They're scary. My mom told me never to go on them. And actually, there are multiple medical organizations that also have made statements literally saying we have done more harm than good by withholding hormone therapy. Just think about that for a second. So those are the misconceptions. And then I'll tell you a little funny story about myself, Miss Menopause expert here, who is now perimenopausal.
Welcome.
Welcome to the club. I don't know if I wanted
Just
an
as
invitation
Elisa.
to this club, but here I am all day long, telling people, teaching. And then I get my first hot flash and I don't recognize. So I don't sweat normally. Maybe I'm brown. I'm built for a different. I'm always cold. And so I can go to hot yoga and not sweat. I wake up in the middle of the night and it's like dripping and I have palpitations. I talked to Tamsin about it. I was like, I know what you experienced. So it happened by the 3rd time I go, oh, these are hot flashes. This is horrible. So now my setup in my room, because I'm normally freezing. So I have a heater. And then I have a fan. And my husband, the dear oncologist, is like, lady, what is going on in this bedroom? I go, welcome to perimenopause, honey.
For the rest of your life.
For the rest of your life. Like, this is the setup right now, and this is what's happening. And I'm like, okay, thermostat needs to go down, heater needs to go off, fan needs to go on. But, and I told my sister, and she was cracking up. She's like, all right, menopause expert. When it happens to you, though, because they describe it in the textbook as a mild feeling of warmth going up your neck.
Mild.
No, it doesn't. You feel like you want to pull your hair out.
The
You're going
towering
crazy.
inferno is inside of you.
Yes. And then like this anxiety in your heart starts racing, and my Apple Watch is like 127, 127. Like,
and it blows up.
Bye, Apple Watch. Yeah, so that is what's going on in my own household.
So you talked about, and I know we're going to talk about this in a minute, but you talked about hormone therapy. The best time to start it is within 10 years of your of going into menopause. How long do you stay on it?
So that is an ongoing, continued conversation with your provider. So there are things that can happen in your life: uncontrolled hypertension, God forbid a blood clot, some type of diagnosis. Sometimes a family member, you find out a family member has cancer, you get genetic testing, you find out you're a carrier. So there's certain things that, we will take women off of, but as long as, you're doing well, we say until 65 is pretty good. And then after that, it's an ongoing conversation. So you have to have a yearly visit. We make sure that you're up to date on mammogram, your screening, your blood pressure is good. And then at HerMD, we go one step further. We assess cardiovascular risk. And so we make sure. And then we also offer MyRisk testing for genetic cancer screening. So people have that data point to make that decision. And then we also offer Gallery testing, which is a newer test you and I were discussing that actually
Scares me to death, but go ahead.
I know it is scary, but some people want that data point before they make that decision, particularly if they have a strong family history.
Explain what the Gallery test.
Yeah, so the Gallery, okay, so your genes are your genes. You're born with them, right? So once you're tested for BRCA or CHEK or any mutation and you're negative, you don't need to repeat that testing. So you're done. So you don't have increased risk. But then there are people who have a strong family history, but they get negative genetic testing. And so Gallery actually tests your blood for proteins that can spike in certain cancers. It is amazing technology because I believe about 50 of the cancers that it tests for have no screening tool in this country. So glioblastomas, pancreatic cancers. The problem with the test, number one, it's not covered by insurance. Your providers do not make money. You pay the company directly. It runs about $800 to $900, but FSA, HSA can be used. And the second thing is the problem is it's not covered by insurance, and a lot of providers are not offering it because of that. But this is what I tell some of my patients. I'm like, you know what you spend on your hair, shoes, and bags? I'm looking at you, Miss Gucci. Like pockets of money, friends, pockets of money.
It's called a Gallery test?
It's Gallery, and it's Galleri. I do not work for the company. I do not, but we do offer it because I believe in giving patients the data that they want and deserve. But think about a woman who has a really strong family history of, let's say, breast cancer, but her testing's negative. She's still like, oh, Dr. Javaid, I don't know. Like, I'm really scared. I need the hormones because I have no libido. My vagina feels like the desert. I want help. I'm going to kill my kids unless you the anger. And so then when they get that data point, they feel better. The test has to be repeated, right? Because it's checking
right
you
away or down the line?
They recommend yearly. Like, because your genes are not going to change, so that doesn't have to be repeated, but people can develop cancer later. So just because you're negative in 2023 doesn't mean in 2025 it's still going to be negative. But what they're finding is these cancers, even pancreatic, much, much earlier. So as we move to earlier detection, prevention, and cure, it's a game changer.
That's very interesting and scary all the time. Some of us are, don't tell me, just do it kind of people. Other people want to know every last detail. Let's get to the workplace.
Okay. I just had a quick question for Somi, if that's okay, because it's interesting. I'm in perimenopause as well, and maybe others here too. And my understanding was that there is an opportunity to start hormone therapy before menopause, of course, right? Are there advantages? Because my understanding from what I've been learning is that if you get ahead of it, if you're proactive and get ahead of it before it gets you, you can stave off maybe osteoporosis. Obviously, there's correlations now with dementia and cardiovascular. But a lot of people in my sort of peer group are starting hormone therapy before they're deep in menopause. So what are your thoughts on that? Because
So full-blown, full dose systemic, meaning not just vaginal hormone, is not yet recommended by all of the major medical organizations in perimenopause. But they do offer things like an IUD for progestin for the uterus. Testosterone is recommended. There's a testosterone consensus statement. And birth control pills are another way to give people low dose hormones or a different dose in perimenopausal years. So yes, you can get hormones, but the major medical organizations have not yet said full-blown hormone replacement or hormone therapy in the perimenopausal years.
okay. Do you think we're headed there?
I think so, because as we are pushing with more and more data, that's why we're so passionate about research. Currently, women are still underrepresented in 3 out of every 4 clinical trials. And so we just need that data to be able to move that status quo and to move the standards of care, forward.
You talked about testosterone, which is a big thing for women. How can women get testosterone? Because we can't, right? Unless, pellets. There are different ways.
Joe, you love pushing my buttons.
Certainly by rubbing up against men.
So testosterone is critical for women. We make it, and there's a test that your doctor can look at your sexual function. It's called the Female Sexual Function Index, and it looks at all. You have domains of sexuality: arousal, desire, orgasm, moisture, pain. And so that's how a doctor can decide, do you need, vaginal hormones? Do you need testosterone? Testosterone has been proven to help with all the domains of sexuality. And there's a global consensus statement that came out, and the NAMS practice, so North American Menopause Society, also came out with guidelines about testosterone. Ask me if there's any FDA-approved product.
Can I take my husband's testosterone?
So actually you can with the guidance of a provider, but it's very, very small dosing. So it's very hard to tell people to take 1/10 of a pump of cream or 1/10 of a nasal spray. So you can either get it compounded or you can get pellets. I will tell you, none of the major medical organizations stand behind it, but those of us who practice sexual health and menopause will do it because we know how to check levels. And the other key thing is you have to check levels and make sure that women are at goal. I will walk in, I have patients walk in and I'm not joking, voice changes and goatee, and your clitoris will start to look like a penis if your testosterone, it's called clitoromegaly. Naomi.
Have you been there?
Okay, no, I
Your
haven't been there.
acting skills right now. You're supposed to be like, okay.
I'm supposed to be poker face.
Poker face.
Okay, so sorry about that. I have feelings. And I'm paid for them. But I'm going to reveal that I have gone down the testosterone path and not had a good experience.
And that happens. It can cause
but I
rage.
didn't grow a penis.
Okay, now I'm done.
Good to know.
I'm glad that's out there.
Glad we cleared that up.
So, but it did make me a bit angry. A bit angry. And I, as I said, I have feelings. I don't need more.
No, and the anger that you talk about, and we've talked about, is normal. Anxiety, depression, all of that. Mood definitely changes. I would have said to you, Naomi, let's dose it down a lot, and let's try if just a little bit helps. So testosterone therapy is not for everyone. There are contraindications, but it can be helpful for a lot of patients, particularly if they're struggling with low libido, problems with orgasm, problems with, desire or arousal. What the exciting news is, the FDA has announced there are going to be clinical trials of a testosterone patch for women. So, God willing, we will have a testosterone product this year for women.
I'll try again.
So Naomi,
But meanwhile,
can we get some clarity on what kind of testosterone you were on?
it was a compound.
Oh.
Yeah.
It was a cream? Yeah, usually patients will experience that with a pellet, and once you put a pellet in, you can't remove it. So then it's like you're going to feel like this for 4 months. But, as you start to digest or degrade the testosterone, it goes down. But, women can definitely experience that. So most of the time it's because the dose is high. But you're right. There's some women who will not tolerate testosterone.
And I got quite sort of red in the face, and it didn't. Yeah, I just didn't feel like it was worth continuing. I literally got one pump or one, applicator, and I did it a few times, and I started to notice the side effects. And I did find that it was good if I had a situation like this, like you had to be filled up with confidence, and I needed to present at a meeting or something, and it was helpful for that. But in terms of performing in the sack, I didn't feel. I felt like, okay, I can use lube, a vibrator, whatever, and I've got a yummy partner. So, but yeah, I feel like. And now I'm going to get personal, but, that wasn't personal. Okay, somebody hook me off the stage now. Libido and sexual issues, I think, really need to start with an honest conversation with your partner. And hopefully you've got a partner who's open to it and not squeamish. And, some of us who are... hopefully, either dating or married to people that are the similar age, so that, it's a easier conversation. They're going to have awareness, and, I think most partners are going to feel grateful for being brought in on the story. Mystery is always hard to work with, secrets are like, how do I navigate? I don't want to bring it up myself. Like if she brings it into the room, now I can be empathetic and I can ask questions. How can I help? I started early on in a relationship as I was, at the beginning stages, and I found myself running to the bathroom and trying to scratch off this patch because I was mortified about it being seen. And then I'd end up with that sort of black mark that is left there. I mean, it's major adhesive. I look like I had a bullet hole in my...
Naomi, there's a mist available.
Also Vagivana works perfectly too. Okay. I might just drop in.
Okay.
But because it's oil-based, not water.
By the way, Oh My Glide.
Yes, or Oh My Glide.
Not bad.
Yeah. So, so once the truth was on the table, it was just so much easier to navigate.
I do want to add one thought, though. For patients and women that testosterone doesn't work, there are 2 FDA-approved products that help with low libido, Addyi and Vyleesi. You can ask your provider about them, so there is that option. And then there are also apps that have been FDA cleared that help with desire. So if you're like, I don't want medicine, I don't want to try, products yet, and you just want to dabble, there's a great app called Rosie that was started by Dr. Lindsay Harper, and they've done clinical trials and studies to prove they have data that there are great outcomes. We use it a lot for our patients. We use it as an adjunct to a lot of the direct-to-consumer products. You just have to have the right menu for you and, frankly, what yourself and your partner feel comfortable with. And you hit it on the head. We send people for counseling, because it's not just giving them the pill and sending them on their way. We also send them for pelvic floor physical therapy. It's that biopsychosocial approach, meaning you take everything into account of what's going on in that woman's bedroom, but also what's going outside of the bedroom that may be precluding her from living her best sexual life. And once you do that, you will be very successful. We have great success rates. We've actually done studies on how this model works with women because we are very complex creatures.
I think that takes us right into sexual health and menopause.
I think so.
I don't know why, but I too I am on testosterone. And at the beginning, I was on a pretty high dose. And I wanted to have sex all the time, which made me kind of happy after not wanting to have it at all for 2 years. But then I started to grow a beard. And that made me very unattractive and not so happy. And I went to my doctor and I said, am I becoming a man? Not on purpose? And she said, we're going to take you down a bit.
Yes.
But when she took me down a bit, so did the sex drive went a little bit. So that's the really... So let's, by a show of hands, how many women in this room are having like delightful sex, not painful sex, delightful sex? Okay. And by a show of hands, how many women even want to have sex? Oh, that's good. More than I thought. I mean, you do go through a time in your relationship where you feel like, I don't even care. And honestly, that's how I found my way into menopause and I only knew I was going into it because I sat with women who were older than me one night, and I said, is there anybody here who's having painful sex? Because I think I'm allergic to my husband. And I was kind of a newlywed still because I got married later in life. And the table around me of women in their 50s and 60s said, oh, I hate my husband. I hope he's having sex with 4 other women I couldn't even get. Or, oh yeah, my husband gets a birthday blowjob once a year. He knows he's done. And I thought, I don't want that to be me. I'm sort of a newlywed. I need to have sex. And that's how I met Tamsin. Not that we were having sex, but that we were both we were both lost in our journey. And somebody a woman at that table said, you need to meet Tamsin. She whines about everything concerning menopause. And I said, am I in menopause? That's menopause? Painful? I had no idea that was a symptom. So, and you're young, comparatively speaking, to, many of us. Have you experienced any of those side effects?
Definitely. No, I mean, we were talking about this. I think I am definitely in perimenopause, and I think before we had the education, before we had a sense of community, before people were really talking about this, I think we were all sort of quietly wondering, why am I sweating? Am I getting sick? Is the temperature down? Why am I suddenly feeling really blue for no reason? Why am I not remembering things? I think I'm so grateful that we now have more information today to really get on top of this stuff and to have each other to talk about it. Because again, these are things that generally people were too afraid to talk about or share unless you're just with small groups of friends. But definitely, and my question for Somi was really, again, I'm sort of workshopping my own life as we build the swell. I'm learning as I go, and I'm definitely up against, I'm sure, menopause very soon. I'm starting to notice lots of changes, skin, hair, the whole thing. I was going to go into sex. I'll save that. But yes, and really interested in, do I start hormone therapy now or later? But in terms of sex, yes. I mean, it's interesting for men. Like, my husband just seems to want to have sex all the time. And
by the way, my husband's 68.
And I'm like, aren't you going to slow down?
Yeah.
And so I guess what I was going to say, I'm still working on that balance. But yes, it's, I think a lot about this, and obviously we want to optimize, our sexual health, our lives, our happiness, our relationships. Because I think women for so long were quietly sort of suffering, quietly stopping having sex because it was painful or we weren't sort of wanting it or feeling it. And I think this was sort of, for women, the midlife crisis really did women a disservice. It was this moment of irrelevancy, decline for women. I think they were generally defined by their children, their homes, their sexuality, their ability, what we've been handed by the patriarchy is our ability to procreate. And I think for, and women that were financially dependent for so long, I mean, this was a real crisis for women. And I think now is a real turning point for us. This is a reckoning, an opportunity, and all this education, an opportunity to optimize all of these things in ways in which we're living, I think really puts us in a great spot.
Yeah, I think you should check out Intro Rosa. It's vaginal DHEA, can be used in perimenopause, and does help with all of the FSFI. So we don't understand why, even though it's local, it can help with libido, desire, orgasm, arousal. I've had patients say after they started it, they've had great weekends, some of the best weekends of their lives.
This is so great, because there was a period of time where men were taking that lovely blue pill and could go all night. And a woman was like,
where are they putting it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in pain. And like, again. And I've heard multiple stories of that. And literally, the tide is changing in real time. We're witnessing it as we speak, thanks to companies like yours. And, because, Tamsin did that wonderful interview of interviewing the doctors of how much training did you actually have based on menopause?
Less than a month, over 12 years of training.
Yeah. And every doctor said the same, or less than a month.
Less
Some
than
said
that.
2 weeks, or 12 12 hours or something.
So less than 20% of us,
You have to choose to take it.
you choose to take it, you pay for it on your own.
So not every guy, and I think that I was under the assumption you go to your gynecologist and she or he normally is the person that guides you along the way. I didn't realize until I met Somi that your gynecologist is not required to take any menopause training.
No, less than 20% of board-certified OBGYNs currently in this country are trained in menopause and sexual health care. 93% of medical students report graduating with being unprepared to take care of the menopausal population. And thanks to, you already mentioned this, increasing lifespan, we're going to spend about 40% of our life in menopause. So these doctors are not prepared to take care of us, for 40% of our lives. And so at HerMD, we've developed something called HerMD University, which is only open to our own physicians right now, but I'm training all of our doctors or mid-levels. It's a very nice program where everyone's trained. So 100% of the providers are trained because we had to fix that paradigm as well. I'm like, I can't live with that statistic. That's horrible. Mm-hmm. Eventually we will be developing our own continuing medical education so we can help other providers get trained, because there's also very few institutions that do train physicians. And when you're busy and you're seeing patients and you're trying to pay the bills, to take, a week off to go get these certifications, it's hard. And then we need to definitely start putting it into medical schools and obviously residency programs and pay more attention to that.
Well, I'm happy you're raising this, because I think what I hear a lot in our community, and I wonder for this group here today, is I think you are seeing the trickle-down effect of the lack of education in medical school, because I think part of what's happening for our generation is a lot of doctors are still very conservative about hormone replacement therapy. You go to your doctor, a lot of us really rely on our doctors or our OBGYNs, and I have found a lot of those conversations are, end with very conservative. They're still a little bit unsure. And so it really takes forward-thinking doctors like yourself, right, today to really push this conversation forward. And hopefully you'll see that, have a positive impact for our kids and future generations. Because we're still navigating, I think a lot of us, we hear all this education, and what I still hear from people is, well, I went to my doctor and she still was unsure. And that's really...
we're stuck. After that 2002, I was just interviewing some candidates this past week, a lovely, very intelligent, bright doctor. When I asked her take on hormone replacement therapy or hormone therapy, she's like, shortest duration, shortest amount of time. And I go, who told you that? She's like, ACOG. I was like, that was like 2 decades ago, but we just haven't, but it's not her, she's not being taught, right? And so I was like, I got off the phone. I'm like, yep, nope, not going to be a good fit for her MD, because I can't have someone so conservative. You have to move with the times. You have to get the education.
I know we have to wrap up here quickly, but let's just get to the marketplace, because the marketplace is a $600 billion marketplace. Naomi, did you have any idea that stripes would be as popular, or did you have any trouble when you were coming up with it, thinking, how am I going to get past the stigma and make this kind of cool?
Yeah, and by the way, the stigma for me felt extra heavy. I'm in show business, and, I feel like in Hollywood, we're told 40, you're done. And then you can just play the old lady. And really, 40 to 60, you're not an old lady. So what do you do then?
Hello, I'm a year away from 60.
I'm hoping. Sorry. But I know, I'm saying these are ridiculous.
I was a big fan.
By the way, 75. Joe, I'm saying these are the constructs and ridiculous things about what Hollywood used to portray. Yes. And I say that, which sounds, Hollywood's like, a bad place. I feel like it's actually a progressive industry, and I do feel like it just gets polarized. But what we do is we learn quickly, and then we create change. Hopefully, I feel like they've done a pretty good job of moving quickly every time they're, called out, and it's just that it comes to Hollywood first, and all these things seem to happen in every industry, but Hollywood gets a lot of focus for all the reasons. So I was very terrified about, putting myself in that category of the unsexy lady. How would I ever play a leading lady again? If I am talking about menopause, I'm putting an expiration date on myself.
You're the silver-haired woman in
yeah,
bloomers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't matter, ultimately. It was a risk to take, and there's no unringing of that bell once it's done. But in a way, I'm just trying to say this is an extension of what I love to do, which is be part of a story. I like to tell stories. And the woman who is going through this time has a very important story, a very valuable story, as valuable as any other story. We have a place in society. Don't go to us. We've got lots to do, and we matter. And in fact, we're better with age, just like fine wine. We are. We're not done, and we actually can reclaim ourselves at this point. So I was all about wanting to learn for myself, and that's why I wanted to create Stripes, because still with 10 years of symptoms, I still didn't know enough. And the message that when doctors aren't giving you the right kind of help and you don't know how to ask those questions is that it doesn't matter. Suck it up and cope. And I didn't feel like that was enough, given that, we are all going to be there and we are going to live another 50 years. Like, this is 40% of our lives. So I was like, I'm going to have to plow through that stigma and hope to be part of the removing of it.
Which was very brave, and we never got to the workplace. But for you especially, the workplace is a really tough place to go
and
through.
also just to add to that, and I know we have to wrap it up, but I wasn't thinking about the business side of it. I was thinking about what needs to happen, and I love my day job. I love what I do, and if this helps me buy more time being in part of storytelling, I'm happy. It's all part of the same thing. I do feel like this is another version of storytelling, creating Stripes.
You're an amazing role model. You're an amazing role model. We've come so far, right? And we think about what the women who've come before us have done for us. We wouldn't be sitting here not for the women before us. And what we can do for the women who come after us is pretty incredible, and take this down another 50 years. And I just want to say, all these women sitting here are making the lives of all of us a little bit better every day with what you do. And it's so important to me, who walked around as an educated television producer who knew a little about everything, knew nothing about menopause. And now I get to learn so much from you guys. So thank you so much. And thanks for letting me do this today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jo.
Thank you.
Do you want to know where Naomi got her clothes in the washer? Because I do.
I do. For a woman like me who had a hysterectomy and was thrown in menopause instantaneously, how can you manage that for other women moving forward and what they can anticipate?
So normally when we have that, surgical menopause is much more severe than natural menopause, because rather than the hormones just decreasing like this, it's literally like diving off of a cliff. And so most people who are trained in menopause will actually put the spray on within 24 hours of surgery. And that's how you mitigate that withdrawal. Like, think about it. Your body was, if you're comparing it to coffee, you were used to 6 cups of coffee a day, and then you've gone to 0. Like, that's ridiculous. And so that's what menopause is. It's estrogen withdrawal. And when that happens and you go from 6 to 2 or estrogen levels of 500 to less than 20, your body goes into complete shock. Like, what is going on? And so those of us who are trained in menopause know that within 24 hours, and the reason we have to wait is because, right after surgery, you're at increased risk for blood clot to leg, lung, because you're not moving as much. But as long as everything looks good, we start treatment within 24 hours of surgery. Yep.
Didn't happen.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I hear that a lot, unfortunately.
Hi, I think I heard you say that I had early stage breast cancer 3 years ago, and Sloan Kettering, their only concern is to make sure I never get cancer again. But if I'm a betting woman, I bet you early stage breast cancer in a couple of years, they might be able to give women HRT. What were you saying about the study, that it is conclusive that HRT does increase the risks of breast cancer?
So when they pulled that WHI data, the E plus P arm did slightly increase the risk, but it was minuscule. I mean, I said this yesterday at a talk, like the risk of smoking increases it much more than estrogen plus progesterone. In the estrogen arm, it actually decreased your risk. I will tell you, there is some data out there in women who have BRCA, who have had early stage cancer, who have had everything removed. And with the oncologist and a menopause specialist, they have been put on low dose systemic hormone therapy and safely, and they have not seen an increased risk. I'm not saying this is mainstream medicine. Yep. I'm not saying this is happening everywhere. Yep. But definitely I have seen that, and I've seen the data. It's small, but it's there. But there are other options for you for symptoms, lots.
Yeah, like
yes.
acupuncture. I'm doing whatever I can.
Well, radiofrequency microneedling, if you have genitourinary syndrome of menopause, vaginal dryness, there are those drugs for libido that I talked about. There's non-hormonal options that are FDA approved for hot flashes. I mean, there's so many options.
I'll be coming to see you in New Jersey.
Okay.
I think we all will, by the way. You're going to be very, very busy.
Mom, I'm never going to be home.
I have a question. I have gotten migraines with Aura basically my whole life, and so there's questions that I'm working with my OB and a psychiatrist who specializes in menopause and perimenopause about what kind of hormonal replacement therapies I may be able to take, estrogen, things like that won't trigger further migraines.
So do you get migraines with Aura are still okay? It's not an absolute contraindication, but if you get physical symptoms like people temporarily go blind or they have sensory issues, then those people we worry about hormone replacement therapy because of increased risk of stroke. So is it just migraine with an Aura? Or are you having physical sensory issues going on with migraines as well?
What would a sensory issue be?
Like temporary blindness, paralysis in the face, numbness, things like that.
No, I think no.
No. So the Aura is just you feel the migraine.
I mean, I get an Aura for about a half an hour and then I get the headache.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of women do. And when I spoke to this psychiatrist about it, she said there's no research done on women who get migraines in perimenopause and menopause, which I thought was bananas.
Yeah, well, that's probably true that we don't have a randomized controlled clinical trial with that, and that's what I was talking about, alluding to data. But I would definitely, and have your gynecologist and your headache specialist, have they spoken?
I don't think so.
See, that's the problem in medicine, too. So when I have complex cases, I always work with a specialist, and we figure out a plan together. So, but I think it's possible, but I don't want to say for sure because I don't know your whole medical history. But I do think there are probably options for you.
Okay, see you soon.
That's like, Somi, you're going to be very busy.
Me too, by the way.
I know. We gotta take a number.
Any other questions?
Two more questions we can do.
I just had a quick question. I was at the event yesterday with HerMD and the Connie Dwyer event, and there was a young lady there that unfortunately it's living rent-free in my head all night. And she said that her question was, how could she talk to her partner? And all I kept thinking was how that this is the first time that you've met this version of yourself and that we should give ourselves grace. And I subjected Stacey London and Dr. Miller to the horrific story of my boyfriend who's 62 and I'm 52. And our first encounter, he says, if you need lube, it's okay. And I thought that was the sweetest thing. And I was like, more than you care to know. That's not my problem, sir. I just don't want it. And so the well is full, but I don't care. And so I think that the conversation of all these things is wonderful. But again, how do we talk to our partner to tell them if you have somebody that doesn't mind the heater and the fan on, and that's fine. Or you have somebody that's so sexy, you're ripping the patch off. How do we talk? How do you have that conversation?
Naomi, how did you...
You need to be on this panel.
So I think that's the biggest thing, that when you are afraid to talk to that person because you don't even want to talk to yourself about it, where do we go? So that's my question for you.
Naomi, how did you have that? You were dating, right? You said? Yeah. How do you have that? I mean, I know I had a hard time having it, and I was married 15 years, but how did you have that conversation? And I hope I'm not getting too personal. But
no, I mean, I certainly tried to hold the secret, but I think holding secrets is far more exhausting. Once the truth is on the table, everyone knows how to operate better. And, you know, we've always known getting older is not for the faint of heart. But we know just a little bit more effort is going to be needed, as it is with everything, not just sexual health. You know, for meetings, I need to prepare a whole lot more than I used to, because I doubt my memory all the time, and my anxiety comes up, and all of these, I'm competing with all of these things as I get older.
I had a pint of vodka before I got here.
Whatever you need to do.
I think it's almost a good litmus test, right, for a relationship or a new relationship. I mean, really, as we enter this phase of our lives, I mean, we really want to optimize, and maybe it's an opportunity to see if you're in the right relationship. If you can have those conversations, because we really have to step into ourselves and really reclaim this time of our lives. And if you don't feel like you can have that conversation, then maybe that's
not the right time.
Yeah, yeah, or something to think about, you know.
30 years later. Bye,
dear. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Hi, I just have one question. Two of you mentioned you guys were experiencing perimenopause. I just wanted to know if you could kind of explain what would be like the first step to understanding if you are going through perimenopause. For example, would it be maybe asking your gynecologist to get some hormone testing done? Or I'm just curious how you kind of navigate the start of understanding what's happening to yourself.
I think that's a great question. I'd love to hand it to you, because I do think, again, what we hear a lot, and I'm experiencing myself, is there's so much confusion here. And you have your one doctor you go to, and if they've been trained or wherever they fall on the spectrum of conservative to modern thinking, you're sort of, that's where you land. And yes, I think it's a great question for you. I mean, as we sort of, I know I'm in perimenopause by the fact of what we're doing, the conversations we're having. Now I know what symptoms to look for. And I am thinking a lot about what should I be doing proactively. I probably don't want to wait until I'm in menopause to start hormone replacement therapy, from what I understand, and I'm willing to sort of jump in that ring and start that. So I think for my own personal journey, I think I am headed towards starting some very low-level hormone replacement therapy. I think it sounds like there's a lot of benefit, not a lot of downside. And I do think the study has done a big disservice to us for many, for this last generation. So, but I think it's a great question. I think this is where you have to get really curious. I think you have to ask a lot, and I think you have to go to excellent doctors that have sort of are forward thinking and are willing to have that conversation with you. What would you say for people in perimenopause?
I mean, there's no definitive test like there is for menopause, but basically it's the 10 years preceding when you get the diagnosis of menopause. You can have every single symptom of menopause, the insomnia, the hot flashes, the weight gain, but the only difference is you're still bleeding. It doesn't mean that you're bleeding regularly. It can be very erratic. But we can check hormones. A lot of OBGYNs are like, well, what am I going to do with that information? I like to give it, if patients ask, as a data point. But what you can definitely diagnose in menopause is low testosterone, and catch that early. And then particularly if the perimenopausal symptoms are around sexual health, low libido, problems with orgasm, problems with arousal, then we can fix that in the perimenopausal state with a simple blood test.
Well, that's another great question, because I think to your question about how do you test for it, what my doctor was saying, again, which was confusing, was well, if I took your blood today, it'll be very different today than it is tomorrow and then when it is next week, of course. And so it's difficult to sort of know where you are hormonally. What are you symptomatic? Are you having symptoms?
So that's very, very true for the hormones that are involved in the menstrual cycle. So estrogen, progesterone, you're right, because we can range even in, not perimenopause and drop, right before our cycle. That's why we start to bleed. But testosterone doesn't do this. And so testosterone, we can see it's not going to increase. And so unless someone's on a medication that drops testosterone levels. So birth control binds up your testosterone. That's why your skin gets so clear and you don't have acne. So a lot of younger patients, and that's the problem with putting perimenopausal patients on it for hot flashes and things like that. It's like, okay, it'll fix all that, but then it may tank your sex drive. And so you have to have that very honest conversation. So symptoms, number one, you can ask for your hormones to be tested, but it's really about, keeping track of what's going on with your body. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
We're going to take a quick 5 to 7 minute break and get started with the second session. Thank you. everyone. Thank you. We're going to get started with our second roundtable. So we are going to be talking about the second panel is Your Body, Your Health, Their Rules, Women's Healthcare Today, and this will cover equity and legislation. And so I'm very happy to introduce our panel. Our moderator will be Dr. Somi Javaid. We have Taniqua Miller, a menopause expert, board-certified OBGYN. We have Shannon Cohn, the director of Endo What and Below the Belt, documentaries on endometriosis. We have Jackie Rotman, the founder and CEO of the Center for Intimacy Justice. And we have Alex Fine, co-founder and CEO of DAME. So I'd like to welcome them to the stage. Thank you all. We're running a little behind, but we'll get back on track.
Hello again, everybody. We'll try to keep you on time. Kamel, did you get through all the intros? Yes. All right. Let's get right into it then. I am so excited, ladies. You guys excited?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. When we talk about changing the system of women's healthcare, we mean the whole system. We're talking about change at every level because, after all, it is our body, it's our health, and we're playing by their rules. How do we really make everlasting change? We create a better system for all patients and providers alike, and we demand better. Today, I'm so excited to have some of the best providers, advocates, and change makers in women's healthcare space to talk about equity and legislation. So, Taniqua, who, by the way, is joining the HerMD team, and she'll be launching our Atlanta location. Woo woo! We talk about gender bias all the time. Can you talk about how that is even more significant when you explore race?
Absolutely. I know how to work a microphone, I promise.
As long as you can operate, girl.
Right. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here. One of the work that I'm really passionate about is providing menopausal equitable care, especially as we embark on our Atlanta office, knowing that it is so racially diverse, and want to make sure that we are delivering not only high quality evidence-based care, but care that is really minimizing bias. And so we know there are so many intersectional identities, especially for women of color, coming into the medical landscape. And so not only are we women, we are also women of color, and I don't think that we can also ignore some of the other stereotypical clothes that we wear as women of color when we come in, whether that's images of our hair or weight bias or anything else like that. And so, unfortunately, in the menopausal space, we do see disparities in care, not just in terms of symptomatology, how women of color experience menopause, but also how women of color are treated in the health landscape itself, with medical providers. So just as an example, there was a study dating back to 1996 that was what we called a prospective cohort, where they enrolled a pretty sizable amount of Black women in that study. Over 28% of the 3,300 women who were enrolled in that study were Black. And what they found as they followed these women for 25 years, that one, Black women tended to experience their menopausal symptoms earlier than their white counterparts. They had a 50% increase in the experience of vasomotor symptoms, yet a 50% decrease in uptake of hormone therapy. And that could be for a host of different reasons. Could it be that, they were not really in alignment with the treatment plans from their providers? Or could it also be that providers themselves were biased against these patients about the ability to pay, about the ability for receptivity for these type of treatments, and on and on. And so there's still a lot of work to do when we create what we call those safe spaces where we can really build trust, not just with the providers, but with the clinical encounter, where we can have conversations that could
really bring the patient into the conversation, because for so long in medicine, we know that there has been that bias.
So you're saying that Black women have more severe symptoms in menopause, get menopause earlier, and have diminished access to care.
Yes, all of the above.
So how do we fix that paradigm?
Yes. Well, first we open up the HerMD brick and mortar in every city across the United States.
Okay,
That's the first thing that we do.
Yes, love that.
But a lot of what we see really does go back to bias in admitting that we are operating in a sea of systemic racism. And so I attended a webinar that was really interesting, and it said systemic racism is not the shark in the water, it is the actual water. So we have to first acknowledge that we are kind of swimming in that. And when we acknowledge that, that's when we can be disruptors. That's when we can dismantle. And so one of the things that I do even in my own practice is recognize my biases. Sometimes we're really scared of it, and as a physician, right, I've taken this oath to do no harm. And so it is like shocking to believe that physicians do harm. No, it is not shocking. We are human beings, and we live in spaces and surroundings that will influence our decisions and how we interact with the world. And so as we think of that, one of the things that I encourage my colleagues to do is recognize your own biases and don't have shame about it. When you can recognize and you can acknowledge, that is when you can actually start disrupting. But when we ignore it and we don't really think that we are part of that problem, then we perpetuate biases along the way. That's the first thing. Two, and we've talked about this like over this weekend, standardize your care. Do not make assumptions about patients. So there are actually beautifully written surveys that we can give patients at the start of their care where we can actually ask them about their concerns about vasomotor systems, about their sexual health. We can actually put it on paper. We're not leaving it to chance to remember, because again, we're walking into those rooms with bias that we might not even ask, oh, sex is not an issue for her. How many times do we say that gynecologists, aren't we supposed to be in charge of like asking about sex? Yet gynecologists do not ask our patients about sexual health. And imagine if you're a 70-year-old woman coming into the office, you're definitely not being asked about sexual health. And I will tell you, having taken care of postmenopausal women who are well into their 60s and 70s, they're having sex and they're having really good sex.
Yeah,
but you gotta ask them about it, right? And so when you standardize your approach to how you're really interacting with patients, that will hopefully mitigate some of that bias. And then the third thing that I would say is be committed to lifelong learning. I think as we just noticed from the first panel, the field is changing so quickly, the recognition is changing around menopause, the conversations are changing around menopause. You cannot be 20 years behind. You cannot still be quoting the WHI. It's just not good medicine. And so be committed as like my physician colleagues to learning. Part of my role as a national certified menopause practitioner through the North American Menopause Society is, guess what, y'all? I got to take tests. I thought I left that behind when I finished medical school. I didn't.
You got to pay for your own courses?
You have to pay for your own courses, which I did. And actually, my mom is here. She's part of that story. So I remember being in residency and not learning anything about menopause. I had that one obligatory lecture that we had, and you get it every other year. In residencies, 4 years. And I ended up seeing a patient very early on in my career. And I was at an institution that had a lot of cardiovascular health treatments. And so I was seeing a patient that had a heart attack. And she came in and she was getting her pap test. And she looked like this. And I just asked her the simple question, because me being me, what's up, sis, you good, right? And I found out that no, I was on hormone therapy. My doctors took me off because I had a heart attack and I'm miserable. And I went to the recesses of my brain, this one little medication that I learned about somewhere along the way at residency that just happened to be something. And I put her on that. She followed up 4 weeks later. I called it the lipstick sign. Fully face made up, lipstick. She bopped into the office, right? And she said, and it made me think, our organs are siloed. You have a cardiologist for the heart. You have your bone doctors. You have your kidney doctors. You have your neurologists. Unfortunately, medicine has siloed organs so much that we forget to look at the patient as this holistic, wonderful human being. And it was on that day that I said, no, in order for me to go forward and really show up as the doctor that I want to be for these patients, because trust me, I can do obstetrics in my sleep, but I knew nothing about menopause it was incumbent upon me to get the training, to get that skill set so that I can deliver good care. And it made me think of my mom, who was perimenopausal in her late 30s. I was a teenager at the time, and I thought it was very funny. I think drama queen was like a really, a great term at the time. But I realized that her providers failed her, because being in your late 30s, being a Black woman in New York City, and being in your late 30s, having those 10-minute appointments, no one was actually putting the pieces together for her. And realizing the impact that had on her life at the time, from mood changes, night sweats, later low bone density, all of these things, I was like, I can't be that. I can't do that. And so it really is incumbent on you to really commit yourself to that lifelong learning, and as a clinician, really, really do it for the sake of your patients, because it matters.
Thank you for that. I love how our mothers, the previous generation, like we were talking about how they inspired change, and we're going to inspire change. You guys are not sitting in the order I was expecting, but that's okay. Throwing me off my game. Shannon, the woman who made me cry the first time I met you, because you moved me so deeply, even though I had been taking care of endometriosis patients for 20 years. So as we're discussing barriers to care, endometriosis is one of the worst conditions when we're talking about delays in diagnosis for women. And it's no easy feat to do what you did, to take all the complexities of medicine and bring something like that to the screen. And so can you talk about, first of all, your experience as an endometriosis patient? And then the second question is the process it took to take that and deliver that beautiful story that you did.
Thank you. I think that's the first time someone's ever introduced me and said, you made me cry when I met you. So thank you.
Good tears, good
yes,
tears.
Okay, good. Just making sure that's clear. Okay. So yes, I have endometriosis. Have you guys heard of endometriosis? I bet everybody in this room's heard of endometriosis, yeah. So I always say it's arguably the most common devastating disease that most people, not present company included, have never heard of. And I have endometriosis. I have 2 daughters who have a 7 times increased risk of having the disease, because there is that 7 times increased genetic link among sisters and mothers and daughters. And like so many people, I first had symptoms when I was 16 and was told, it was part of being a woman, cramps, everybody gets cramps. Maybe my pain tolerance was low. I was exaggerating. I was trying to get attention, and I was completely outraged, of course, at 16 when you're told you're trying to get attention because you're complaining about, painful periods. And I was thinking, who are you? What are you talking about? I know how to get attention. I'm a 16-year-old. It would not be this. And now we know, at the time we didn't really know what the term was. Now we know it's gaslighting. The textbook definition. And then when you're told that as an adolescent by someone in power, it is incredibly damaging, and really sets so many people who have endometriosis and other conditions that are not straightforward, and especially to do with, sexual health or reproductive health, careening toward this other path that it doesn't have to be. And the reason why, so endometriosis, it takes an average of 8 doctors over 10 years to diagnose. This has been the same for decades. It's still the same today. So we have young people going doctor after doctor, still being told these things, okay? Test after test. I first heard the word at 29. So I went 13 years before I even heard the word. And this is after I had two miscarriages. I had multiple surgeries. So a lot of physical, personal, emotional damage, that were needless. And why is that? Should I go into some of the systemic issues and gender bias?
No, please do. That's why we're here.
That we've learned. Basically, why is there gender bias in medicine? I'm a filmmaker, but I'm also a lawyer and an activist. So I've looked at this issue in a lot of different ways. And of course, it all starts with we live in a world controlled by men. And that's how it's always been. And unfortunately, that's still how it is. That's the reality. And we are all trying to do the best we can living with still in that paradigm, in that ocean that we all, that's the way the system is built at the moment. And because of that, we are almost taught to be unreliable witnesses to our own bodies. We're conditioned that we feel like we're unreliable witnesses to our own bodies, to our own health. So we're already starting when we talk about our experience of this position of being, disempowered. So there are three things that I think that we can focus in on. The first is education and taboo. First of all, if we don't understand our bodies and body parts, then how can we actually communicate what's going on? Menstrual health education, for example. There was a UK charity, I think it's called Eve Appeal, that they did a research recently that 44% of women could not find vagina on a diagram. 44%. Because they haven't been taught. We haven't been taught. Like, for example, things that are going on in the Florida state legislature, without getting too, political at the moment, where they don't want to teach mental health education to children less than sixth grade. I have a sixth grade daughter. She's 11. She understands periods because I'm her mother. But she has classmates that have started their period and been terrified because they don't understand what's happening in their body. So we're seeing this codification of education in older adolescents because it's about that control, in my opinion. And beyond that, with taboos, I think it was Clue, the Clue app. They did research recently where there are 5,000 euphemisms for the word period because we're all still using other words. Because we haven't been taught the vocabulary. We have been taught that it should be secret. And that's what we're dealing with the first, education and taboo. Second is this long-standing idea of hysteria in modern medicine. We've all heard about the wandering womb, hysteria. But the thing is, what's happened now, it's been modernized to somatization. And this idea that if modern medicine can't find out what's going on with you, then the impetus is on you. Like, you're the problem. Your mental health is the problem because the doctor can't, because of their toolbox, can't find the answer, then it must be you. And that's this idea of hysteria and how it's kind of taken its own word. And endometriosis is a huge part of that and a lot of other conditions that are like it. The last thing is, we've talked about this in the last panel, is medical research. And hysteria, the concept of hysteria ignores the fact that modern medical research doesn't really know a lot about women. The NIH Office for Research on Women's Health wasn't even set up until 1990. The NIH didn't start doing research on women until 1993. Did you know, for example, I think it's like 80% of chronic pain patients are women, yet 70% of chronic pain research is done on men. And this is the last stat I'll give, which is particularly egregious. Up until 2016, this is 7 years ago, the NIH did not require that pain drugs must be tested on women. They were only tested on men. 7 years ago. So this is the ocean we're dealing with. It's not a shark. It's an ocean. It's a system. So just painting that picture first, and then that's what a disease like endometriosis, of course, it's going to grow, and it's just a canary in the coal mine.
And when we present to the ER in pain, we wait longer for pain medications than our male counterparts.
Yes.
We're more likely to die of cardiovascular disease. And that harmful medical terminology, I worked on a project, but even we talked about this. Removal of the uterus is hysterectomy because we think we're going to remove a woman's hysteria. The Latin root for uterus is actually mitra. It shouldn't be called hysterectomy. So there are so many reasons for gender bias. So what made me cry, and I should have clarified that, I apologize, Shannon, was that, I see patients, did the surgery, prescribed the medications, talked to them on call when they were in pain enough to need me. But you brought forth those moments where they were just trying to live their daily life, and it wasn't bad enough where they needed medical intervention, But to watch them in those moments where I didn't get to see them, I mean, I could not, you need to see her film. I could not stop crying. My sister was sitting next to me because it was so beautifully, intelligently done. So you personally went through this, and that's what I want to know. I want to understand that creative process and what you felt, which must have been, I know when I started HerMD, it was such a, not a burden, but a responsibility. Like I have to, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And so tell me about that creative process of from going from patient to creator.
Yes. I mean, well, you know, I think we're probably all here because of some personal reason, right? Like we're all called to a life's purpose in some way because of our lived experience and where we are. And that's part of that. I am a filmmaker, and I knew I wanted to tell stories that mainstream are not seeing. And I have lived this experience. I understand what it's like to, yes, go to the ER and wait longer, you know. That research article, which is so egregious that it was like in the Journal of Law, Medicine, and Ethics, that women who present in the ER with acute abdominal pain wait an average of 65 minutes. Men wait an average of 49 minutes for the exact same symptoms. And women are typically offered a sedative first before they're given pain medication. That's that research. I wanted to encapsulate that idea, but in a personal way, so that people can see, like healthcare providers, yes, they see beyond who they see in their doctor's office or the ER or the OR, so that people understand that the human cost that we're dealing with here about gender bias in medicine, racial bias in medicine, the social stigma around menstrual health, reproductive health, it's nuanced, it's real, and to create those human connections. I mean, we're all storytellers in some way. I'm a trained storyteller, so I knew, like, it just needs to be true, you know? Like, you put a camera on someone long enough and you create a safe space, they're going to tell truth. And that's what we did.
Well, thank you, because the work was beautiful.
Thank you.
Alex, women do not have access to information about sexual health and menopause due to restrictions in advertising, but you are a badass. And because up until now, there was no distinction between porn and true sexual health. So tell me about your battle with the MTA, launching ads on the subway, and what you've done for women.
Sure. And yeah, I wouldn't say that distinction has even really been made yet. I'm still really, really proud of the work that you're doing, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit. But it's really not there yet. So hi, I'm Al. I have a company called Dame Products. We're a sexual wellness brand. I make everything from lubricants to, I just launched massage oil candles, and of course vibrators. And when I started the business, a few years in, I started running ads on Facebook, and it was awesome. I was really pleased with my CAC to LTV ratios, and I was, my main funnel was actually sharing New York Times articles, BBC video. We had gotten Megyn Kelly Today Show. So we just had all of this really great mainstream press, and we would share that and promote that, and then people would come through and eventually buy our products. And then slowly Facebook decided that that was inappropriate, that those articles themselves were inappropriate. Like the New York Times article was inappropriate. Mind you, this was like 2016 when like Trump was running, and it was just really wild to be told that I was inappropriate and that my voice was a problem and that I was doing harm into society, and that also these publications were being inappropriate. It's like, come on, it's the New York Times. So they shut down those ads, which was like a huge source of revenue and inventory movement for my brand. It created a lot of cash challenges and a lot of stress. And it was so tough. And then since then, I've definitely have I sued the New York City subway system, and one of the way we got there was a few years later. The New York Times had ran an article saying that the subway system said that they would allow sex toy companies to run ads. So I called them up and I was like, "Hey, you guys said you guys would run ads. I would love to run an ad." I sent them a ton of different copy. They specifically approved the copy. I couldn't say things. They didn't want any train puns. They were like, "Don't do that."
The copy was so good.
Thank you. We get you from point A to point B. Like, they didn't like that. I was like, okay. Anyway, and then when I made the advertisements. It's my whole Q4 advertising budget, which is a pretty big deal for us because Q4 is a big time of sales. I sent them the ads. I asked for the invoice, and it legit ghosted me for 6 weeks, and then came back and said they do not work with any sexually oriented brands. Meanwhile, they do. They run Hims ads and Romans ads. I think that the advertisement, they also are still running ads, which I think is, again, I love these ads. I think these ads should exist for the Museum of Sex, which makes most of their money selling products like mine. So I'm happy that they can run ads, but why are we deciding that they're yes and I'm a no? And there definitely seems to be a real gender divide here. We often seem to think that men need their erections, that their erections are part of living a healthy life, but whether or not their partners enjoy those erections does not matter. Sex therapists call it like a Viagra victim, which I think makes a lot of sense and is unfortunate. And we sued the system. We won the right to run advertisements. They were not able to explain why erectile dysfunction isn't a sexual tool, while mine is, and mine is problematic and theirs isn't. They did those since change their whole advertisement policy. So, I feel really great that I sued them and made a stink and fought the fight because it's something that I'm passionate about. I don't love the results, but maybe we will sue them again because who knows? And also, Meta also doesn't allow. I want to let you talk more about Meta, but it's been really challenging and frustrating to see how, while, I don't know, I think for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people here, it's amazing that 7 years ago they finally changed it. It's crazy that it was only 7 years ago that they changed the regulations around pain meds that you guys were just talking about. But I'm trying so hard to be like, all right, Meta's policy improvements are slight improvements. Yay! A little bit, and trying to be positive about the change because we're making those changes. And we should celebrate those changes too. So that's my story.
I love the work that you're doing. And I actually, I go to sexual health conferences, and one of the best lectures I ever went to was, what do you do for your patient when all of a sudden, instead of an elephant in the room, there's a penis in the room? Because that's what happens. They get prescribed Viagra. They haven't been having sex for quite a while, and all of a sudden patients, vaginal dryness, pain hasn't been addressed. And so it's like, well, what do you do for the female patient? Plus, their medicines often aren't covered by insurance. But Viagra, which, by the way, I said this yesterday, was fast-tracked in 6 months. National emergency by the FDA. God forbid they don't have their erections. They don't know where they're going to put them yet. But, seriously.
It's wild.
It's wild.
We don't know man needs an erection in order to live. It's something we do because it makes us feel alive, and because sex is fun and enjoyable, and it should be. And it's, women are 4 times more likely to say that sex has been not at all pleasurable in the past year. And what we're saying is that we don't care, but we do care that you are getting on your back and that your partner can get an erection and have sex with you. And we're validating that over and over again simply by just showing the advertisements. Meta is essentially saying, it's written out in their policy now, they do not allow any sexually oriented products to be sold for pleasure. It cannot be for pleasure, but except for erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation products. It's just like carved out.
So, Alex, have you seen a change, though, with the new data that was presented with vibrators helping with, because I call vibrators a tool now. I stay away from toy. I call them a tool. But now there's data that was presented at a major medical organization that it helps with pelvic floor health, helps with a lot of the domains of sexuality, arousal, moisture, desire. Mm-hmm. So with that clinical data, have you seen a change?
Nope.
Wow.
No.
I would even say, as a physician, caring for the women coming in with the partners who are now being prescribed these medications, to your point, there is a sense of society conditioning that, like, you do this to please your partner.
Yes.
And it is one of the more heartbreaking things that one of the first things I ask is like, well, is this pleasurable to you? Are you experiencing pain? Tell me what's going on. How can I help you so that you want to have sex? And they will say very, very straight, I don't want to have sex, but I'm doing it for him. He's such a good man. And it is so heartbreaking because there are decades and decades of conditioning that get us to that place. And I'm not telling anyone how to operate in the relationship, but I do think it's when you have data that says this tool can actually improve pelvic floor dysfunction, can increase lubrication, or all of these other domains, but this is explicit. Yet we're enabling partners to have tools, right, to be able to have sex. It's like, where do you go with that? And it's really, really challenging as a physician.
And it's wild, too, because I think we use sex so often to sell other products. Yet, acknowledging a tool that would make that sex pleasurable is inherently prurient. Prurient is the word that gets thrown at me a lot. And I just think that's wild. And I think it's really important that we learn to have public discourse about sexual pleasure. Healthy sex is supposed to feel good. Period.
And sexual health is healthcare. It's health, period. Just like mental health, like any other part of your process.
They keep on just trying to remove pleasure from it. That's usually like the language. Or like, oh, well, if it's about safe sex, then it's okay. But if it's about improving sex and making sex pleasurable, then that's not okay. But that is the core issue that so many women are having, is that their sex is unenjoyable. And if it's, that's not healthy, good sex. Healthy sex should feel good. It should be something we're enjoying doing. It should be something we look back on and also feel good about doing. All of that's really important. And it's I think, a real shame, the way we've set it up.
I agree. So, Jackie, you're at this frontline battle for all of us. You understand that this battle doesn't just exist in the physical space, but the digital space. You've researched the ways that Facebook and other major tech platforms censor information about women's health. Can you share examples about the way women's health information is being blocked online and how that's impacting the field from what you've seen?
And I have so much love for so many of the people in this room. I've known Al since 2018 and have watched you fight the MTA. And Al was one of the very generously first people to financially support Center for Intimacy Justice, very generously. And there's just so many people in this room, including all, sitting down, that have partnered and done so much for this fight. So I'm really glad to be with all of you. And on the endometriosis topic, part of why I knew that statistic about how long it takes to get an endometriosis diagnosis is because there was an ad that Emily Sauer, who's the founder of ONUT, created. Is Emily here? Oh, hi, love.
Yeah, are you here? Oh, my God.
Hi, Emily. Emily invented, speaking of, what's the term about places where the penis doesn't have someplace to go? Anyway, Viagra victims. Anyway, well, unrelated to Viagra, but Emily invented this donut that it's called ONUT, and it is meant to make it so you can better control intercourse and penetrative sex to be less painful for those that have pain. Anyway, her ad that said it takes 3.5 years to sail around the world, but 7 to 10 years to get an endometriosis diagnosis. Meta rejects that advertisement and still is rejecting that advertisement even after revising their policies in recent months to specifically say that pain relief is allowed. They're still rejecting Emily's ad. We've put that ad in the New York Times in 2019, and they're still rejecting it. So there's a huge gender bias. And just to visually depict what Al was talking about around when dames' pleasure ads were banned in 2019. If you were in New York, if those of you that remember walking in the subway, you would walk through like a 20, 30-foot tunnel and just see a cactus that was 30 feet wide representing a penis to sell an erectile dysfunction advertisement. So we've been fighting this all together, many of us here, for a long time. Where are we right now? So it's April 2022. And I'm also going to talk about the Comstock laws and a little bit about censorship that's happening more recently, because we're seeing this censorship law come up in the Texas abortion case. But just to summarize, so Al had done a lot of work on this. Unbound, I think Thinks had done some work on this. All these brands were speaking out and doing incredible work on top of running their businesses. And so we decided, let's create a nonprofit, Center for Intimacy Justice, where we can pool our resources into one nonprofit. So instead of every entrepreneur having to be a full-time activist in addition to a CEO and running their businesses, we can all have a place where we can do legal strategy, government relations, media strategy, but under one collective place, specifically on the issue of censorship of vaginal health and breast health. And so in January 2022, it just been a few months of being full-time on this. We released an investigation in the New York Times that depicted how we had surveyed 60 businesses, all led by women and non-binary people, mostly for vaginal health and wellness, and every single one of the 60 had their Facebook ads rejected, and every single one of them. And 50% of them had their entire ads, their entire account suspended. So they're just locked out. And sometimes it happens during Black Friday week. The company that had their images in that New York Times piece 10 months later had their whole account suspended for 2 months starting Thanksgiving, Black Friday week. So we saw some changes. Hillary Clinton tweeted about it, which made people feel seen. But where we're at now, there's several major issues. The first is that, like Al talked about, pleasure, not pleasure, but really pleasure for anyone who's not a cisgender man is still blocked. So Facebook says that pleasure is not allowed, but they, in the same policy, allow erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation ads. The second issue is that even the categories that they say are now allowed in menopause, pelvic pain, and sex education, if it doesn't talk about pleasure, they're still not enforcing that, except for, I think, Rosebud Woman is having great success with their ads. So Michelle is here, and I'm so glad about that. But most, we're not seeing a change. And the further issue is that TikTok, Google, and Amazon, and all these other platforms are having the same problem. And TikTok will just take down content, not just ads. So we're coming back in 2023 with even more resources. We have received a lot of amazing philanthropists have put money into this. Mainstream philanthropists that we're not allowed to say their name, but people that you never would have thought would fund this are backing this issue. And so we will be filing a legal complaint with the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, and we have I think we've met with 11 congressional offices just in the past month to get Congress members on board for this, specifically for Meta to be an issue, and we need to speak out about the pleasure piece as well. So the fight is definitely still continuing, and there's a lot more I can say, but that's where we're at. And I think this issue of censorship, I was tearing up when Al was talking, and I get really emotional about the gaslighting topics and the disparities between how penises are treated and people with vaginas. And there's so many ways that people's voices are silenced. They're silenced in talking about our pain. They're silenced in so many ways. And so I'm so passionate about changing the censorship because our voices deserve to be heard powerfully, and we should be able to make money making those voices heard. It's an economic issue and also a health one. And so I want to make it so we're changing the censorship so that all of you and all of these incredible people can have their voices heard.
Jackie, thank you.
Have you seen? And I've also felt, though you'd probably know too, it seems like the male-run businesses, even in the women's space, seem to have an easier time running the ads. And that is also interesting.
Have you seen that I've heard that Hims got vibrator ads through.
Sure. I've seen Mystery Vibe, which is male run. They've gotten some ads through. And, sometimes you see ads that get through and then they get taken down. And so, just trying to stay calm. And I think what's really hard for me personally, woe is me. We just launched at 300 targets. Yay! Yeah, you get served the ads because I'm the perfect target for this type of product because I'm clearly online looking at sexual wellness products all the time. So I see everything that gets through. And it's a really hard, it's emotionally challenging for sure. And there's also like brands like Cake that have raised $18 million fairly easily, when I think a lot of the women-run brands like Polly and I have really struggled.
And that's our next panel, talking about in the investment space for women's healthcare companies. I do want to talk about one topic that we brought up. So you mentioned Congress and DC, and I know, Shannon, you were recently there, right? Mm-hmm. To spread endometriosis awareness with legislators. So when we are talking about policy change there on Capitol Hill, where do we even begin? I'm sending you the easy ones, right,
Shannon?
Thank
you so much. Yes. So we have, we screened, so the film is Below the Belt, which approaches endometriosis as a social justice issue. And it will premiere, I don't know if you did this I'll just plug it. It's going to premiere on PBS nationally June 21st, and it's exec produced by amazing people like Hillary Clinton, Rosario Dawson, Corinne Fox, Mae Whitman. And since the beginning, we've had incredible bipartisan support for the work that we've been doing. First with Senator Orrin Hatch, and then Elizabeth Warren. The two of them worked together, and we generated several million in additional research funding from the Department of Defense. Did you guys know that the vast majority of breast cancer research in the United States comes from the Department of Defense?
No.
She did. You get the gold star back there. Yes. So some really ingenious women in the 80s thought, everybody's jockeying for NIH funding, right? You have this finite pie. And of course, it's hard to make a comparative judgment. All, conditions are important, and we all need research funding, So we need a new pie, basically. And the DoD has something called the CDMRP, Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program. And the standard is if you can show that there is a health condition that affects the U.S. Congress, the U.S. military, or the U.S. public, then you can petition for research funding from this. So these incredibly smart breast cancer advocates went after DoD funding and got it. So the vast majority of breast cancer research funding and ovarian cancer research funding comes from the Department of Defense. So we had the idea, okay, let's, there's a lot to be said for learning from people who come before you, right? We're all standing on each other's shoulders and supporting each other and learning from one another. So we said, let's do that for endometriosis research. And Senator Hatch and Senator Warren were on board, and fiscal year 2018 was the first year we were able to do that. Senator Hatch retired, and then Senator Mitt Romney has taken his space. And we have been working in Washington in the women's health space in a bipartisan manner for the past 7 years, which is interesting. We did screen this film Below the Belt on Capitol Hill for members of Congress last month. And Senator Romney and Senator Warren hosted the screening. Members from both sides of the aisle attended, as well as leaders from the NIH, from ACOG, from ASRM, all of those DC acronyms that are just, endless, but you want there. And really taking a practical approach. How do you do it? It's demystifying. It all feels when you talk about policy, when you talk about all of these legal issues, it all feels very huge and vague and overwhelming, doesn't it? But it's not. It's really not. It's about demystifying the process, deciding what the end goal should be, and then reverse engineering. That's all it is, you know? And literally it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm sure you probably know that. And then how do you get there? Wow, where do you start? First, you do your research. You know, you do your research, you see what's out there, you get facts, you take them to both sides of the aisle. Then it's about messaging. What should your messaging be? All of you, everybody here knows about messaging. We know about branding. We know about finding motivations of people. It's the same thing with people on Capitol Hill. What's motivating them? They want to be reelected. How do we, you know, what makes their electorate like them? What's going to be attractive for them? Putting it in terms that helps them. It's human nature. Whether it's endometriosis, sexual health, reproductive health, and putting it in terms that it's an easy yes and a win-win. And honestly, I mean, as you probably all know, it's like you make it as easy as possible for people to say yes. Sometimes you have to do the work for them and say, listen, we've already done the research. This is where we can get the research funding. This is the language that needs to be used. And this is why it's good for you, and your constituents are going to be happy. And they're like, oh, great, sign. I mean, yes, I'm simplifying it, but really, it doesn't have to be hard. You have to have the right collaborators and the right strategy. We all know about having the right collaborators, right, and the right allies, and how important those strategic partnerships are. And recognizing those people and recognizing the people that you can work with, and you have good intentions and you have aligned goals, and then knowing when those partnerships are not going to work, and then and having the courage to move forward without that partner, because they're not going to get you there. Those are the two of the main keys. And those are general things. I hope that's helpful in some way, but no.
No, I want to thank you all for the work that you are doing. You are an amazing group of women. Really? A round of applause for them. I know we're running horribly behind schedule. HerMD, question time or no? We're at time. We'll hold questions until the end if you want to hang out with these fabulous women. Thank you all so very much.
It's amazing.
could take their seats, that would be really great. Thank you. So this next roundtable, we are talking about innovation and investment in the space. And so I am really excited to announce our last round of panelists. We have Wendy Liebman, who will be moderating. She's the founder and CEO of WSL Strategic. We have Sally Mueller and Michelle Jacobs, co-founders of Womaness. Sarah Foley, partner at SWAT Equity. And Manisha Gia, managing partner and founder of Femtech Ventures. And finally, Rachel Braun-Schurl, managing partner and co-founder of Spark Solutions for Growth. If everyone could take a seat, we're going to get started. That would be great. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for hanging around. It's been a very busy, extraordinarily inspiring, and absolutely frustrating series of conversations, right? What else could we say here? So we're going to talk about the practicalities of all of this. We're going to talk about the commercialization of all of this. When I first met Somi, and she mentioned that 40% of our lives are going to be spent in menopause, the first thing I thought was, are you kidding me? And then I thought, oh, that's an opportunity, right? Here's an opportunity for a whole new business, a whole new series of businesses that can support what women want, what women need, and what retail, which is the world I live in, really needs. A new business opportunity driven by women and people who are going to spend money on it. So absolutely the commercialization of it. So that's part of what we're going to talk about today, or most of what we're going to talk about today. Now, we've got a slightly out of kilter thing, not to point the finger at Manisha, but she has to leave in a minute, who lost control of the time here. Anyway, so I'm going to start with her and then let her run. So first in, first out. So why did you get into this space? What is it about the work you do and the investment work you do that made you say, I'm in?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? It's working? Okay, great. Well, thank you, and thank you to everyone for putting this event together. And as Wendy mentioned, I do have to leave early, unfortunately, but I can give you briefly my story and tell you why I'm doing this and what I'm doing. So in brief, I run a venture capital firm focused specifically on women's health. In terms of my background, thank you. Thank you. And so in terms of my background, I've been investing in healthcare specifically for 23 years. So I've been an investor in the private and the public market, so in venture capital as well as at hedge funds. So many of the multi-billion-dollar funds across the city, for example, are ones that I worked with previously. And what I would say is what really inspired me to do this is my own personal experience. So I have a healthy daughter, and she was born at Columbia University here in the city, and I had major complications with the delivery. So in brief, it was a Sunday night, and her heart rate had gone down, so the OB decided to do an emergency C-section. She was born in healthy, but I didn't feel so well afterwards. And it wasn't until the next morning that the OB realized that I had been bleeding internally the whole night, and they had missed it. So she rushed me into the OR, brought in 3 additional surgeons, and the 4 of them spent 2 hours with me open, trying to find the source of the bleed. Unfortunately, they were not able to find it. And I was taken to the ICU, and I had 10 transfusions, including blood and platelets. And it got pretty bad, to the point where the OB told my husband that she didn't think I would make it to the next morning. And in the middle of the night, she had them rush my newborn into the ICU to see me because she didn't think I'd be around much longer. So at 1 a.m., she had them rush my newborn in so that at least I would get a picture with her. So it got pretty bad. Fortunately, in the subsequent hours, my body started catching up with the bleed. And after a few weeks in the hospital, I was able to come home. And that experience was significant and traumatic for me. Here I was at Columbia University, one of the top academic institutions in the United States, with a highly experienced care team. And yet, there was so much more that could have been done. And it brought to light the need and the opportunity in women's health. And having been a healthcare investor throughout my career up until then, I felt the way for me to make the most impact was to create a vehicle focused specifically around women's health to help bring innovations to market and new tools and paradigms to help women's health across the board. So that is why I started the Health Center. Thank you. Thank you. So what I'll say from here, I'll just add a little bit about the focus of the fund and what we're going after. So in brief, we're a women's health-focused venture capital firm. We're looking to support companies developing technologies in women's health. I'm investing across 4 key categories: devices, diagnostics, drugs, and digital health. So across life sciences as well as in the digital health category. And then the one additional point I'll add here is how we define women's health. So I first published in 2019 a new way to think about women's health. It's something that I developed over the course of decades investing in women's health and healthcare broadly, and realizing that women's health has been overlooked. Prior, a lot of people thought about women's health as what an OBGYN treats, or reproductive health. So in 2019, we first published a 3-category framework, and that includes conditions that affect only women, conditions that affect mostly women, and conditions that present differently in women. So only women is reproductive health, and generally what an OBGYN might treat. Mostly women includes things like autoimmune disease and migraines that impact many more women than men. And the 3rd category is differently in women. So this includes things like heart disease. So for example, most people are familiar with how a man might present with a heart attack, but they might not be familiar that a woman could present with different symptoms. There are many conditions in this category, and we want to support companies that are taking these differences into account as they bring forward their products. So that's how we define women's health. I do have to leave in a few moments, but if anybody would like to reach out, please feel free. We're at femhealthventures.com, and if you email the address on there, we'll make sure to connect, and would enjoy meeting the many others who are looking to make a difference within women's health. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that was an amazing setup. It seems to me, this is, everything we've heard today is incredibly personal, and the root of what everybody's doing here has begun with a very personal story. So Sally and Michelle, who began Women-S as really one of the really early introductions into this space of consumer products. What was your personal story in this?
Well, it's such a pleasure to be here. We're so honored. And our personal story is that both Michelle and I really had our own experience going through midlife. And for me, it was my menopause experience. So I was in my late 40s. I knew I was in menopause. I had, obviously read books and tried to become informed, asked my mom a lot about menopause. Of course, she winked and said, oh, it was nothing for me. I had no symptoms. I don't know what you're talking about, but I had a lot of symptoms. But the biggest issue is I just thought it was hot flashes. Even though I had read books, I didn't comprehend the number of symptoms that were involved. And here I was experiencing probably 10 or 12 of those symptoms, everything from sleep issues, low libido, a lot of the issues we've been talking about today. So after years of kind of suffering with this, I finally went to a doctor at the Mayo Clinic, and she was very, very knowledgeable about menopause. And she made me feel not alone. She really educated me about what I was going through. And then at the end of the appointment, she said, here are some products you should check out on Amazon. And that was really my aha moment of, it was just terrible. These products were not modern. They weren't made with clean formulations. And this is not any disrespect to her taste level. It was the best that she could find out in the market. And this was, 5 or 6 years ago. So we can imagine how bleak the landscape was at that time. So my takeaway was just the need for education, the need for new modern products. And then I'll let Michelle talk about the other part of our brand.
So Sally and I have known each other for probably about 20 years, and I heard all about her health issues. And I also came from, a long career of building women's lifestyle brands. I worked at Real Simple Magazine. I worked at Home Shopping Network. And when Sally and I were talking about this and talking about the lack of education, we also identified that there was just no visuals that really looked like us out there in the world, in the marketplace. There was women, it felt very much like a woman running down the beach, like holding a hat and like dancing, sort of funny, drinking a glass of wine, and we're like, this does not look like us. So when we talk not only about creating a new product line, we also wanted to create an entire new visual identity of what women in their 40s, 50s, and beyond looked like. We wanted them to be cool, modern, representing the amazing women that we knew. So we took this idea of innovation in product, lack of education out there, but also inspiration. And inspiration became a huge piece of how we were going to go out into the market differently.
And what's interesting to me about that is I think about, we've had this Viagra conversation today, and I think about the bathtub. What is the bathtub and the Viagra commercial? Sorry, anybody who works for, sorry, that's not very nice. But anyway, so that reality check, right, of you as your customer, right? So, Sarah, you were early into investing in Womaness, right?
Indeed.
So what was it that in this investment space, in your background, that said they've got the right idea here?
Well, that's a great question because we invested before they even launched, which is not usually our MO. But so I run a venture capital fund as well. We are more consumer brand focused. So we're looking across a lot of product categories and services, a little bit of technology that can help those companies scale faster. But where we're really trying to find the sweet spot is an underrepresented customer base with an excess of demand for something that they're not finding. This was kind of squarely fit in the category of a lot of that, but represented a product line that we thought was going to be interesting. It wasn't just a single product they were going to launch with, which has its own sets of risks. It was 12, actually, and it was across some skincare, some supplements, and some feminine care products, trying to, again, wrap symptoms that we're all facing, that so many women in the world are facing. It's a huge category. It kind of fit that massive TAM requirement that we talk about. We need to find something that's got a big addressable market. But there was no modern version of it. And I do think each generation of women are looking for better products. They're advocating much more strongly for what they need and what they want. And this was another derivation of that we thought could be a great fit. So we made our initial investment, and we followed it on with another one, and we're following it on with yet a third, as we really try to help where we can. This team and Sally and Michelle really find product market fit, reaching her wherever she is, but really reaching her in her mental space, in her physical kind of space, and where she's shopping.
And that's one of the challenges, right? And we've talked about this a little bit, Rachel. So the opportunity to begin, and Naomi talked about this, in sort of a direct-to-consumer space, because you can control the message, you can connect directly, you don't have to worry about the retailers yet. And yet we know that direct-to-consumer space is an expensive space to do business, and that retail somewhere has to be on the horizon. So can you talk about your expertise in that, and then when you look to invest, how do you think about that journey to get to her wherever she is?
Yes, thank you. Before I do, I just want to say for me, this is like a dream day. To be in a room where everybody's passionate about this, mostly women. When I got into the space 15 years ago, I would have been talking to myself probably, and maybe one other person. So and Somi and Komel have made it a family affair, literally, and figuratively, with children and moms and mothers-in-law. So thank you so much for creating this opportunity. The second thing before I answer your question is I've been for as long as I've been in the space, people said, oh, this is the next female Viagra, which really just reflects the lack of knowledge about female sexual response. But I used to point out the difference. I would start a meeting and I'd say, show of hands, anybody looking for a partner with a 4-hour erection? And, there's rarely a hand except some guy in the back who misheard the question. So it just speaks to the fact that we were raised for the past 3 decades on a world where sexuality was bigger, longer, stronger, and sex was described as a performance sport, which is generally not how women think about it. So, thrilled to be here. Back to your issue. I focus on building businesses, large and small. I've run businesses in this space. I invest in business in this space, and my bread and butter is working with companies to grow. So I'm delighted to be here with so many familiar faces. So if you look back, probably just a bit before you guys launched, you saw these brands exploding on DTC, direct to consumer, where you could acquire customers through Facebook, and you could acquire customers through Google Ads, and there wasn't a lot of competition, and it was like the greatest idea since sliced bread. And you look at the brands like Glossier, where they use that data to figure out where they should open retail locations. And then the world changed because investors, not as smart as they are, were investing at these crazy valuations for companies that were growing at all costs, making no money, hemorrhaging cash, and it wasn't a sustainable model. You have the challenges that Jackie talked about. And have you ever heard of research where 100% of the people in the research had the problem? It's sort of unheard of. And you add 2 changes in iOS 14, difficulty to track, Facebook, everyone else has migrated to their new branding better than I have, but Meta's policies that really were discriminatory, and the first time I talked about this was 2010, like on TV, about the problem with Facebook advertising and the difficulty with getting access for men's and women's brands. So there's so many things that are happening. You have difficulty getting capital, you have difficulty getting access to the media channels, and certainly for the older customers, I wasn't saying that we're older, but maybe some of the people who buy the products are older, is that Facebook is where they were getting their information. And so the perfect storm would be it got popular enough on Facebook that then it would be on the Today Show. And that was considered, the Holy Grail. Now you hit COVID, and it was an interesting combination. No one was going into stores, but you still needed to have stuff in store. And so it became, for the past 3 or 4 years, and correct me if I'm wrong, you had to be a multi-channel business. You had to be direct to consumer. That was really hard. You had to be brick and mortar. That's really hard. So you're trying to do all these expensive things. And I think what's missing is really what you said and what Sarah was talking about is we are different consumers. It is a different world. We're not Gen Z and millennial, but there are lots of different places we are, lots of different roles we play, and we need to be able to access our products wherever we are. So where we are now is we're building businesses in spaces that are complicated, that we don't know where they fit in the store. Do you go in the migraine section? Do you go in the skincare section? Do you go in the sanitary protection? Do you go in the incontinence section? It's hard for a retailer, which is why direct to consumer makes so much more sense. But all of this is hard. That being said, there's so much progress. So it's really, really exciting and still very, very hard. So I'll leave here being uplifted, although at various points in the day, I'm not going to lie, I did have some down moments when you see how hard it is.
Yeah. Well, I do think, too, you put it into a context of how long this has been going on and the opportunity. I first met Sally when she was at Target, and building innovative businesses and brands, whether it was around fashion and other things. And so you think about those places where women are in terms of everyday shopping, now back in the stores doing all those kinds of things, and the need then for retail, traditional face-to-face on the ground retail, as part of this mix. So what are the biggest challenges you two see in that space today? And then where do you need money to be able to do what you believe I will call it the shopper, Target calls it the guest, the woman wants?
Now you just made this an overnight. I mean, to just answer this question, it's going to be like this 6-hour thing.
No,
I'll
she's
try to
good
be
Target.
brief.
Expect
No, I'm
more.
not. It's so
I
complex.
know. It could be a whole another panel. I think Rachel hit it on the head. Just where do you put it in the stores? So we're in select Target stores. We're in Ulta stores. Target doesn't have a menopause section. That would be like revolutionary to have a section where women are looking for this product and we make it easy for them. And so, Ulta has a wellness wall. We happen to be on that wall, so that's a little bit, easier for us to communicate because we're in one location. At Target, we're in 2 locations. But I would say that is the biggest issue, is how do you create the right shopping experience for this consumer when there's so many different needs? I mean, we have sexual wellness products, we have skin and body, and we have supplements. And within supplements, we have sleep, hair, skin, and nails, and we have all around menopause. So it is a complicated, it's the right solution, and that's what the customer wants, but it is a more complicated merchandising issue.
I would just add to that, we're also competing with brands that are focused on Gen Z and millennials. So, you have a TikTok go viral and everyone runs to Target and buys that product, and you have a 26-year-old buyer who's so excited about that. For us, it's much more complicated. One, we have to explain to the 26-year-old buyer what menopause is, why they need all of these different products, why they cross categories, so we actually also need the other buyer in the room with us. And that our customer is not listening to influencers necessarily and running into the store. So it's going to be a slower build. It's going to take some time. We're also educating our customer at the same time about symptoms. So it's so multi-layered, but and I'll just add, investors will say to us, you need to be successful direct to consumer and at retail. So we have this huge challenge at retail until we have a partner on the other side of the table, like a Target, like a Walmart, a CVS, who says, I will partner with you and build the space for you. It's going to be this like mishmash that's going on, and that makes it harder for us to be successful and then tell the story about the success at retail.
So when you look at that, Sarah, I'll get the S's right. Is that brain fog? I don't know. My life is a fog, so it doesn't matter. Oh, thank you. I do.
We'll give you
It's all
menopause
right.
after
Many of these things. There's no solutions. Yes, there is. I thought it was only about sleep, lack of sleep. Who knew? Then I met Somi, and I know everything else I'm supposed to be thinking about. Who knew the symptoms emerge or the clarity? But so when you think about this, Sarah, and the investment that you bring to this and to this brand specifically, the complexity of that and where you're thinking about driving that, is this part of a solution that is about women's health that we have to be thinking about? Or do you look at other categories, other business models or businesses where there's some similarity that you can say, maybe we think about it this way or that way? How are you thinking about that as sort of money and advice within your role? That's a long question, sorry.
So interestingly, we have 60-70%, I think, of our investments by number of companies are in either female-founded, which is wonderful, or it's a female-centric kind of solution, which I'm proud of. It's not an intention, but it's certainly not accidental. We've got womanists on one end of the spectrum, which I identify with certainly much more than some of the Gen Z things we invest in. But we've also got something in overall vaginal and reproductive health. in the portfolio in a company called Styx. But they're focusing on the woman at the very beginning of their sexual wellness journey. Half of them are trying to get pregnant. Half of them are actively trying not to get pregnant. And so their whole focus was on education, which content is very much queen in the category of building traction, awareness, and pull to the pull of your customer to wherever she's shopping. But they're trying to make sure that these young women understand what it means to be sexually active and maybe get a UTI. And don't just Google, why does it hurt when I go to the bathroom? There's going to be an implication if you don't have it addressed. And they're trying to work with that young population, finding them where they are, largely on college campuses. The scaling of the business model is increasingly complex for all of the reasons we've talked about here. There's no magic silver bullet. You have to be well capitalized. You have to find the right capital partners who have a long-term vision, especially at the early stage at which we're investing, and that it's going to take time, and there's no up and to the right, as we call it, kind of path. There are lots of deep valleys along the way. What I think surprised me about Womanist, after we initially met and started talking, was the reason we decided to invest in Womanist in the beginning was because they had a launch partner identified. What that means is, while they were not yet in market, they were going to work with Target to help put product in stores. 80% of us still buy things in stores. You know, it's not the holy grail to just get one channel right. We have to be multi-channel and meet women where they're shopping. But that helped us get over this risk of, if you build it, will they come buy it? Because Target's a great partner. They have a great distribution network, and a lot of women our age are shopping there. But they didn't kind of figure it out well enough. You know, they didn't get the merchandising right. They have her in the store, but they weren't really talking to her about the things that are going to draw her to the shelf to go find these products. That's what Womanist has really had to dig in, much more so than I would say a lot of our other portfolio companies on the education factor. And again, it comes back to this flywheel that we talk a lot about, which is a combination of content, commerce, where you're buying, how you're buying, and then the community, all of the customers that get involved, embrace that early adopter set we talk about, is those who quickly embrace and want to start buying these products. They work, they have to be effective, they have to have efficacy, whether it's skincare, food, supplements, they have to be effective, because you'll lose that customer in heartbeat. And then they go tell their friends, and then their friends, in that kind of viral effect really starts to work. But it's, as you said, Michelle, it's a very complicated process, and it's only gotten more complicated. And there've got to be, the source of capital to be able to go spend the time that it takes to find these things, test like crazy, and then double down on things that are winning, that change month to month, is real. And access to that capital is, another part of the equation, and a big, big puzzle piece that we still also need to solve.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me because, and Rachel, I'll toss this question to you as I formulate it, but we heard this morning this conversation around, first of all, it's educating us, we the women who have the need, who have the symptoms and don't really know what it's all about, on a day-to-day basis, or even particularly on an extreme basis, but day-to-day. So the medical community, the scientific community, all of those things. And then that delivering it in terms of a commercial model of products. Now, you work with some very big established pharmaceutical and OTC companies. Is there something that those companies know, or is it the resources they already have? Why are they not doing more to drive this change?
I would say the answer to the first question is no, they don't know more. Yes, they have a lot more money. And when you look at what's happened to many of the leading pharmaceutical companies in the past several years, like J&J years ago, when they had oral contraception, they were the women's health company. Bayer just announced that they're not going to pursue women's health. I really think because they don't understand it. When you look at it from a business perspective, I challenge any of these less informed investors and companies to find an opportunity that literally affects 1 out of 2 people on the planet and could last for 40 years. And you could need dozens of products. I mean, we're cash cows. If you take a look at us, so
other people cows. Don't look at me when you say that.
Oh, I was not. I said to someone earlier, like, I have a good memory on the elephant in the room, and I'm like, I don't like that analogy so much.
No. The gazelle.
Yeah, I'll be the
swan.
This is like Barbara Walters. What animal would you
connect
with? But I think the other reality is how complex this is. The reason we don't have a female Viagra is because male sexual response is much simpler. It's a hydraulic pump. You pump the blood in, it works. Everybody's good. For women, it's physiological, it's psychological, it's sociological, it's emotional, it's social, it's behavioral, it's contextual. And we heard Somi speak, and we've heard everybody speak. This is a complicated set of symptoms that do not naturally fall under one retailer, one physician, one consumer's purview, knowledge base, range of understanding. So it is not that they're being obtuse. It's hard. It's hard. And one of the things that I've seen working in consumer products is it's much easier, and I think Sally will nod her head, it's much easier to get someone to move from one toothpaste to another or one makeup brand to another. What's really, really difficult in this space is getting people from inactivity, lack of knowledge, not lack of motivation, to making a product choice. And that's really the education, as you said, it's at the payer level, it's at the customer level, it's at most investor level, and it's at the company level. And if we're not training doctors, how on earth are we expected to know? And the last piece I'll add is the literally pathetic, and that's being generous, state of sex ed in this country and around the world, and porn becomes a de facto sex education. So we're out of it before we even start.
Shannon said something about going to Capitol Hill. I don't know if Shannon's still here, but going to Capitol Hill, and I think she said make it easy as possible to say yes. Now, that to me stuck, because it said, here are we, all this extraordinary group of women in this room, whether we're investors or innovators or CEOs or media people or big companies with amazing talent. Am I being naive to say that here we are, do we have to put on our pink pussy hats and stand at the barricades and say, this is what we expect? Or do we have to find advocates in the companies, not the 26-year-old, but maybe it is the 26-year-old. I don't know how old Alex is, but, with Dame, incredibly impressive and passionate in terms of where they're headed. So there've got to be some solutions here. Is it long-term thinking? Is it you've got to have investors who are willing to stay the course? Is it the intrepidness of, this is a very long question, sorry, it's my soapbox, the intrepidness of you two?
It's everything, it's fighting the battle at every stage on every front. DC, that swamp in quagmire, I'm not going to get it political either, but it may start grassroots with, can we get more women in office who understand, empathize, and appreciate the experiences around healthcare needs for women, period. That's changing. It takes time, clearly, but it is changing. The capital side, obviously, which is near and dear to my heart, I have been in the investing business for a long time, 25 years, and started in the very more male-dominated, like leverage buyout, so later stage of investing in private companies. What I've found being a venture capitalist now is that it's so much more collaborative. There are more women. It's a little lower bar to get started in venture capital because you can have a smaller fund. And raising capital on our side of the table is also challenging to find LPs who want to invest behind what we're doing. It is not easy to raise capital. I mean, let's just put it out there at all. It's still a very networked kind of business. And if I had any advice for anybody in the room who is interested in being related to capital, network like crazy all of the time. Always be closing. That wonderful Glenn Ross quote. But you kind of always have to be thinking about relationships far short of trying to only make them transactional. But that's how it kind of, I think, maybe comes more naturally to others, not all of them in this room, that just find themselves in those situations. But you've got to always kind of be thinking about how am I going to get networked around people that believe in what I'm doing and also have some capital to support it.
Well, I think Can I just add something to that? I think the fact that the demographics are changing in perimenopause and menopause is going to be the best thing that's going to happen to all of us. Having events like this probably would not have happened 10 years ago. Having investors interested in women's health wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. But the change in fertility, a lot of the things we talked about, endometriosis, miscarriage, all of those things that happen with younger women, those women are now aging into perimenopause and menopause. And so when you said, do we need our pussy hats at the gates? It's going to be led by the consumer. The consumer is going to be asking for these products. They're going to be demanding that their doctors know more. They're going to be wanting better care for their bodies. They're living longer. They're going to stay active longer. And because of all of that, the world is changing. What we ask for from investors and from retailers is to have patience because they're coming. The people are coming. It's just they're aging into it. And I think that is really, it's going to come from the consumer more than anything.
Yeah, we have a saying in our company as we do retail strategy, follow the shopper to see the future. And I think even listening to Jackie and Alex before and the passion that they have, for what they're doing on lots of fronts, not just product, but standing up against the inequities, made me really feel very encouraged about that. And is it also, Sally and Michelle, finding the advocates within a retail organization that get it? Maybe it's not the 26-year-old buyer, but is there somebody else within an organization who can help bring this story to life faster?
Yes, I absolutely think that's true. For example, at Ulta, we know that the SVP is using our products. I mean, she is in menopause. She's passionate about what we're doing, and so is the divisional. So that helps just get the ball rolling, and I think that's what you need. And I don't know if it's an age thing, but it's like a passion thing. Because you can be a 26-year-old buyer and be passionate about this. I mean, we have employees that are in their 20s, 30s, 40s that are not yet in menopause, but they are so passionate about this. I mean, everyone in this room, you could feel the passion. So I just think it is education. It's painting the picture of what the opportunity is. We do a lot of research with our customer and sharing that research. And I think all these retailers want to be consumer-centric. So the more that we can share, where this is all going, what the consumer is asking, they want to be successful. So we're trying to lead them to the water. We can't make them drink it, but we can lead them to the water.
As long as it's not the water that we talked about in the shark or something. No, it's the new water, right? It's the blue lagoon of fabulousness. So I think we are a little short of time. Do we have time for a question, or we're out of here? Okay, because they're leaving, she's got to put money in her meter. So I don't know. It's one of those. So anyway, so before I say thank you to everybody, any questions from the floor about how we can all be advocates for this? Wow, we've worn you all out. You're all ready to go and stand at the barricades, I hope. It seems like it's about that. So, all right. Well, I can't thank you all enough for all of this. It's a long road, but boy, it's exciting. So thank you for being at the barricades.
morning. Thank you for supporting everything that we're doing, women's health. This has been extraordinary. We will be doing another one. I don't know when. I'm not going to make promises as I look at her, but thank you all.
Stay tuned. We'll be getting in touch with you all soon. Wow. Thank you, everyone. I am so inspired. I love being in rooms with dream makers, change makers, and I do have to give a special shout out to my sister and co-founder, who is behind this whole event and deals with me. Because, you know, dreamers sometimes we're tough ones. But I am going to tell you this. You know, we all need that person to, like, give us that push. I was very happy living my life in Ohio and doing my thing and taking care of patients. And that's what HerMD would have been if it weren't for this one saying, lady, you got women coming from 35 states and 3 countries. Like, I like my gynecologist. I don't hang out with her after hours. Like, let's scale. She quit her job in February of 2020, her good paying job, to come work for me at a startup. And we all know what happened in March of 2020. And we pursued, we surrounded ourselves with amazing co-founders and people who believed in the mission. We fundraised, and we are going to be expanding nationally very, very quickly. So thank you all, and here is to raising all of our collective voices.